Chapter 372. In the afternoon, Andre was standing in his room with a cigar in his mouth. He was looking at the slaves who were working hard outside through the window. His attire was completely different from the traditional attire of the trading city-states in the central region. He was dressed in a plain black robe with a black wing symbol on his shoulder. As the leader of the merchant group sent by the Northern Empire to the trading city-states in the central region, he immediately carried out the new orders from the upper echelons of the empire. Although the trading city-states had abandoned the slavery system in name, the root of the evil still existed in name. Under the drive of the system, the great slave owners of the city-states changed their appearances and names, but they were still active in the trading market. Andre put down his cigar. They called the humans outside as workers, but in reality, they were still slaves who could be bought and sold freely. And that was why he came here. Mr. Andre, you said that your country wants to mine the veins, and you need a large number of people and laborers. The great slave owner in front of him looked at Andre's request and asked doubtfully, "This is a hard job, but why do you choose these children who are not of age yet? The journey to the north is too long. I don't want them to rebel on the way. Only children are easier to manage." Andre took a sip of tea and said calmly, "And you're not happy to get rid of these annoying little things?" "A little." The other party smiled. As a slave owner who had the biggest business in the trading city-states and had not fallen for so many years, of course, he was not a mediocre fool. He knew that the other party was just making up an excuse. These children are precious wealth. I can wait for them to come of age and sell them at high price. If some of these children have the talent to become professionals, then I'll make a lot of money. With such a large number, some of them might have the potential to become spellcasters. These children are still growing. They eat a lot and don't listen to me. I don't believe that you have that kind of patience." Andre shook his head non-committally. "They're the things that you don't lack the most in the trade. You can use these slaves to exchange for the most precious gold here. Are you not willing?" Even so, the slave owner glanced at the workers outside the window. "But I'm losing out on this deal, so I have to pay more." Both sides echoed each other, just like when they were discussing goods. After some bargaining, they finally reached an agreement. Since it was their first time working together, both sides more or less had their concerns. Therefore, the transaction amount this time was not high. Andre bought 1,000 children at a price of 30 gold per person. They were all children below the age of 15, and the youngest was only 9 years old. Andre watched as the slave master's servants helped him count the number of children. Although he did not know the purpose of the empire's purchase of foreign slaves, there was no doubt that the order to only purchase children in the trade was correct. These children had been reduced to slaves and had no one to rely on. If Blackwing could save them from their misery, it would be no different from a second parent to them. Moreover, once they reached the north, they would have a long life ahead of them. After being in this business for a long time, the efficiency was naturally high. Very soon, the 1,000 children that Andre needed were counted. The slave owner's private army was responsible for escorting them to the port of the trading city-state. The sea route from the western sea of the north to the central inland sea had been opened, and trade between the two sides was much more convenient. The muddle-headed children lined up and arrived at the port. They were terrified of the army and the supervisors. Obviously, they had suffered a lot before. Whether it was in the northern kingdoms, the trading city-state, or other places, the human management of slaves had always been strict. They were almost not seen as different creatures and were easily hanged or whipped to death. In a short while, the port was crowded with slaves. Many older children looked up at the big ship with the black dragon flag flying. Although they might have realized something, they were at a loss and had no idea what to do. The younger children were already sobbing softly. Two children who were closer to each other were whispering. Andre's ears were very sharp. He could vaguely hear their whispers along with the wind of the port. "Sister, this ship has a dragon painted on it. Are they going to give us to the dragon as a gift to be eaten?" "No, this is to—" "Don't worry, I'll protect you." Andre looked in the direction of the voice and saw a girl with tied hair and a scar on her face comforting a younger boy. At this time, the leader of the army came to his side. "Do you want to untie the chains?" Every slave had an iron chain around their neck. In addition, there were also heavy handcuffs and shackles. Andre thought for a moment and sighed. Not for now. Let them board the ship. 20 silver for a pair of shackles. The leader of the army smiled and reminded him. He then signaled to his companions. The supervisors violently pushed the children onto the dock. All the disturbances caused by the uneasiness along the way were beaten up. 20 large ships, 10 merchant ships, and 10 frigates stood quietly. In front of each gangplank that led to the merchant ships, there was a wooden table. A few humans in black robes were sitting behind the table with paper and pen in their hands, waiting for the slaves to arrive. The child slaves were divided into 10 rows. They came to the table and were asked the questions that they had prepared beforehand. Then, the black-robed children were responsible for recording. The children who knew each other were separated and assigned to different ships. For example, the siblings from before. Because of this, there was another burst of crying and chaos. The process was extremely slow. The leader of the army waited for a while. Then, he frowned and asked impatiently, "Is this going to take until tomorrow? Why is it so troublesome?" Andre did not look at him. He stared at the slowly moving people on the deck and said, "The deal is done. These are now the private property of the North. The money has been paid to your people. If you don't want to wait, you can leave first." "Very well. I'll look forward to seeing you again." After hearing this, the leader of the army led his people away without hesitation. Immediately, armed personnel rushed out of the frigates to take over their task. A few orcs and flying apes flashed by, causing the slaves to panic again. "Looks like we'll have to meet again soon." Andre shook his head. As an imperial merchant, he had to carefully carry out the orders of the royal court. Among these slaves, the royal court was adamant that they did not want northerners. If they were not northerners, they would not have any connections in the north. An unfamiliar and helpless environment would be more conducive for the empire to control. About 40 northerners were selected. Later, Andre would have to go and negotiate the exchange. Emperor Black Dragon was a great dictator. He did not buy these children for his own charity. Instead, he wanted to cultivate a group of outstanding and loyal talents to serve the entire empire. Therefore, during the registration process just now, those who were related by blood, familiar with each other, and even those who had only exchanged a few words with each other were separated and assigned to different ships. They would not have any chance to interact with each other. The purpose was to make them isolated and helpless individuals who could only wait quietly for the arrival of their savior. Chapter 373. After a week-long journey at sea, the ship filled with slaves finally arrived at the port on the west coast of the Blackwing Empire. The children transported from the central trading city-states would disembark here and live in the camp arranged by the royal court. Mira could not find her brother. After disembarking from the ship, the children were strictly quarantined. She was arranged to share a room with other children of similar age. When she disembarked from the ship, she saw a terrifying scene that was unique in the central trading city-states. A mountain-like black dragon was entrenched at the dock, exactly the same as the one she saw on the ship's flag. Mira was only 14 years old this year. She had been in the trading city-states for as long as she could remember. She did not know where she was born or who her parents were, but she knew that she had a brother who she depended on. At that time, after the black-robed man on the ship finished registering, he looked at her with sympathy and ordered her to be separated from her brother completely. When she first boarded the ship, Mira was terrified. These large ships with evil dragon flags were filled with strong and powerful men. Their faces were completely different from the people of the central region, and they were all carrying sharp knives. The children who had just boarded the ship were at a loss and huddled together, but they were quickly ordered to stand properly by the adults on the ship. "Slaves of the trading city-state, your gods cannot save you. But let me tell you, from now on, your fate has changed. Thank the great Dragon King." Mira remembered the words of the man who seemed to be the leader of the trading city-state very clearly. Dragon King? Mira had never heard of this name before, nor did she know why she was thanking it. However, the moment the leader finished speaking, he ordered his men to bring the children to the canteen on the ship. The moment she entered the canteen, Mira was dumbfounded. On the solid wooden dining table that was fixed to the floor, there were large basins of bread, sausages, and fragrant meat soup. The children immediately became restless. This was a delicacy that they could only enjoy in their dreams. When it appeared in front of them, no one was not excited. The sound of saliva being swallowed could be heard. However, the strong men on the ship were not much easier to talk to than the slaves of the trading city-states. They used a thick and sturdy short stick to hit and beat the children who wanted to walk out of the line. Screams could be heard incessantly. The leader ordered them to remain silent for 15 minutes and not move for a moment. After that, the children who met the requirements were allowed to line up to receive food. Mira was one of the children who met the requirements first. She was already used to the feeling of her life being controlled by others. At this time, only by being obedient could she live a better life. When she took her food and sat down on the table, she found that no one was restricting her. She could not wait to eat. She did not care that the hot soup was scalding her mouth, and very ungracefully while stuffing bread into her mouth and gulping soup. She hoped that her brother would receive the same treatment. At that time, Mira thought that in order to prevent the food from being stolen, she stuffed all the bread into her mouth. Only then did she start chewing hard. At the same time, she had the time to observe the surroundings. At the beginning, her gaze was completely attracted by the food. Only then did she realize that there was a huge portrait hanging on the wall facing the entrance of the canteen. Myra's cheeks moved. She blinked. She found that the portrait was similar to the flag on the ship. Was this the Dragon King that the leader had mentioned before? She looked up at the dragon's huge head in a daze. Tears flowed out unconsciously. Fear and timidity filled her chest. But the warm soup in her stomach gave her a glimmer of hope. Seeing that more and more children were paying attention to the portrait in the canteen, the leader finally said loudly, "This is the master of the whole North. He is also the one who will decide your fate. The Dragon King, Emperor Caesar Tangerine." The Dragon King. On the dock, Mira looked straight at the huge figure. Like her, many children who had seen the portrait of the Black Dragon on the ship also looked up at the target with their mouths wide open. At first, they thought that they were listening to a story. But now that they saw it with their own eyes, they knew that it was real. This was not a dream. There was actually such a huge dragon in the world. Caesar had brought people to accept this batch of slaves. At the same time, he had people check the children's bodies at the dock. A few days ago, he had received Andre's report that the North had made full preparations to accept the slaves. But to be honest, 30 gold for a child slave in the trading city-state was so expensive that it made one's teeth ache. Compared to the North, the money in the trading city-state was even more worthless. Iradia had no reference standards for the construction of academies. This was because there was no similar place on this continent. Regardless of whether it was a sect or a guild, they were more like an organization of power and not a place to learn knowledge. But this did not mean that Caesar had no reference standards. He started from pragmatism, imitating Napoleon's reform of the education system in his previous life. With the core idea of providing talents for the court and the army as the core idea, he set up specialized subjects. After completing the basic subjects, they could study vocational subjects. The total length of study was 6 to 9 years. Caesar did not have any requirements for the names of the academies. He simply added the word academy to the names of the academies. Thus, a series of new academies such as Rhine Academy, Kalshan Academy, Fey Academy, and so on sprung up in the north. After dealing with the matters of the academies, Caesar rushed back to the empire's court without stopping. This was because just now, in the empire's military factory, the first model of the land weapon that he had requested had finally been produced. Standing in front of the Black Dragon was a small war fortress. Its entire body was covered in thick armor. It was 1 to 2 meters taller than the tight security walls around the military factory. A long cannon barrel pointed straight ahead. There were also 6 small cannons around it. But this was not a war fortress. This was because it was moving. The ugly tail that looked like a locomotive spewing out white steam was particularly eye-catching. This was a steam tank. Under normal circumstances, it would take at least 5 to 10 years for an important piece of military equipment to be produced, developed, tested, and finally equipped to the army. However, driven by Caesar's will, the Blackwing Empire's efficiency was unimaginably high. Less than 2 years after the steam furnace appeared, a prototype of the steam tank had already been produced. This steam tank was designed for orcs. It was 15 meters long, 5 meters wide, and 6 meters tall. It could carry 8 to 10 orcs. The tank was equipped with one main cannon and 6 secondary cannons. The design of the multiple turrets allowed its firepower to cover all directions. It was truly a weapon of war. However, its degree of completion was not very high. It looked very bloated. The entire structure was filled with rough marks of rivets. Although the goblins had applied an earthy yellow coating to the surface for camouflage, the gaps between the armor pieces were still very obvious. You say that this thing has already achieved initial success and can be used in battle? Caesar asked hesitantly as he looked at the steam tank that looked like it would fall apart at the slightest movement. After receiving an affirmative answer from the Red Lotus Goblin, he nodded and said, "Very well. I'll let you guys operate it. Go and get the 5 demon hounds." Chapter 374. Demon hounds were not a unit of measurement for combat ability and had never been. The demon hounds were the most powerful clan under the command of the Black Dragon Emperor, and their performance in the war was impeccable. Every adult demon hound was a terrifying combat weapon. Generally, 30 demon hounds acting together could destroy a small human army. Half an hour later, the steam tank followed the instructions of the Black Dragon Emperor. Amidst the rumbling noises, it arrived at the designated location, a secluded open area. On the other side, 5 adult demon hounds that had not been aberrated and strengthened were already waiting there. Caesar had a rough idea of the combat ability of the 5 demon hounds. This was the minimum requirement for the steam tank. If it could not reach this standard, then there was no need for it to exist. Compared to the resources used to create it, the profits were too low. The battle was on the verge of breaking out. The Red Lotus Goblins were the ones operating the steam tanks. The demon hounds had no feelings for these annoying little guys. The order they received was to completely destroy the moving fortress. They had no intention of holding back. As soon as the steam tank was started, the demon hounds immediately scattered. Although they did not understand this iron lump, their combat instincts made them realize the threat of those turrets, and they did not want to give the enemy a chance to concentrate their attacks. Then, there were 2 bang-bang sounds. Obviously, the goblin operator was very nervous. After receiving the order, he immediately chose to open fire. The steam tank's 2 auxiliary cannons emitted blazing flames, but there was an obvious deviation in its aim. The shells smashed 20 meters in front of the demon hounds, leaving behind a crater and smoke. But the demon hounds seemed to be frightened by this scene and did not immediately approach the tank. 2 demon hounds quickly jumped away and swept past the steam tank from both sides to its rear, as if they were hunting in a group. During this period, the steam tank's auxiliary cannons and repeating rifles kept firing. But under the premise of no professional training, it was not easy for the operator to hit the enemy moving at high speed. After a round of fire coverage, not a single shell hit the demon hounds. At this time, one could clearly see the muscles of the devil hounds' hind legs bulging. They had already completed their probing and were ready to launch a real attack. The devil hounds cooperated seamlessly, launching a pincer attack from the front and back. Caesar nodded inwardly at the sudden burst of power. Almost in an instant, the strongest demon hound had already crossed the distance of 15 meters and approached the steam tank. Without waiting for the tank to adjust the muzzle, the demon hound abruptly changed its direction and jumped onto the tank. Its sharp claws reached out to the joints between the armor, and its muscular forelimbs continued to exert force. The goblins in the tank did not notice the hound's bulging muscles. Their sluggish reflexes only allowed the goblins to realize that the hounds had closed in on them. But when the hounds tried to tear the tank's armor apart, the steam tank's adaptive magitech system had already reacted spontaneously. The magical coating activated and spread out into a thin layer, covering the armor. The magic coating was a simple defensive measure. If the enemy could not resist, the demonic hounds would only need 1 to 2 seconds to tear the defense apart. But now, 1 to 2 seconds was enough to kill. The steam tank's main cannon, which had never fired, turned around and aimed at the demonic hounds who were trying to break the defense. This was the best chance. Boom! Hot smoke and a thunderous explosion. When the black main cannon fired, the terrible recoil caused the entire steam tank to shake. The next moment, the shell rushed out of the flames and smoke and penetrated the body of the demon hound with great force. It blasted a huge hole in its abdomen and sent it flying. Sticky blood splattered everywhere, and a pungent smell spread. The demon hound's body twitched after it landed on the ground. The terrible gunfire had almost destroyed half of its muscles and internal organs, making it completely unable to fight. Even if the priest from the northern region, who had been on standby, immediately went to treat it, it was hard to say whether the demon hound could survive. The demon hounds that were still standing let out a low growl, their green eyes staring at the thick and long barrel. Very few things could take their lives like this, but this thing could. They had already seen its might and were extremely afraid of it. The battle continued. The demon hounds attacked more vigilantly, trying their best to avoid the long and thick main cannon. Although the tank's secondary cannons could also cause damage to them, this degree of damage was acceptable. 5 minutes later, a demonic hound, under the cover of its companions, once again arrived at the vicinity of the steam tank. With a roll, it pounced on the tank from the side, attempting to destroy the terrifying main cannon to secure victory. Its forelimbs, which were already covered in wounds, quickly swelled up. Cracks appeared on its surface, and a mist of blood spurted out. Just before it succeeded, the steam tank's secondary cannons fired together. Even if the demon hound wanted to exchange its life for victory, it could not do so. It was directly pushed back by the impact of the fierce gunfire, just like it had been pushed back countless times before. Enough. Seeing this scene, Black Dragon finally said stop. The result of the battle was already clear. As the battle continued, the two sides deepened their understanding of each other. It became more and more difficult for the steam tank to hit the demon hounds with its main cannon, and the demon hounds also found it difficult to break through the steam tank's defense. In the end, it turned into a boring war of attrition. The key to victory was that the demon hounds consumed physical strength. As time went by, their strength and speed would rapidly decline, and they would not be able to recover their strength. They would eventually be killed by the cannons. However, the steam tank would not change the power of its every attack until it used up its last reserve of cannons. Similarly, after exhausting all its functions and cannons, the tank could only wait to be slaughtered by the demon hounds. Your Majesty, we haven't failed. We can still fight. The demon hounds struggled to say. Once the desire to fight was aroused, these guys could not calm down. They wanted to tear apart this tough iron lump. You've all performed well, but there's no need to continue this battle. Caesar said. This was not a normal battle. Under normal circumstances, the demon hounds would not be able to force their way into the tank's face. Compared to the tank, the demon hounds had unparalleled flexibility. Their constant harassment day and night was enough to destroy the tank driver's will. Of course, the performance of the steam tank was also outstanding. Whether it was the indestructible defense, the large range of firepower, or the power of the main cannon, all of which satisfied Caesar. At this point, it could be declared that the land weapon project had achieved initial success. Next, the steam tank only needed to be completed to a higher level, and then try to design a set of magic targeting system. Then, the factory could be officially built for mass production. Chapter 375. Your Majesty, I'm sorry to tell you a piece of bad news. When Caesar returned to the court with a few demon hounds and ordered the construction site of the tank project to be put into production, Hogg, who was in charge of the Prime Minister's affairs, immediately came to the door. We have lost contact with the Underdark. Theron Gobi? Caesar asked subconsciously. Currently, There was more than one Underdark that belonged to the Empire. One was in the Blackwing Court, under the feet of the Black Dragon, and the other was in the ruins of the Therengobi. It was the starting point of Caesar's rise, and now it had become a hiding place for the undead. Yes, Hogg said solemnly. In fact, as early as 3 days ago, we have lost contact with the Underdark. I have sent 2 flying dragons to investigate in a row, but the executor of the mission has not returned yet. Lord Angormo should also be in that place. Tell me in detail, what's the problem? Have you used magic to detect it? Caesar asked. In order to ensure the Empire's control of the North, whether it was the Greenfield Dragon Nest, the Wild Farm, the Underdark, the West Coast, and other areas, they must ensure that they communicate with the Blackwing Court every day. The skeleton dragon Angramo also knew this law, but there was no news after 3 days. Something must have happened. The situation is still unclear. I can't directly order the leaders of other clans to investigate. Without the help of legendary power, I still can't know what happened in the Underdark. Hogg said in a low voice. But the spellcaster's magic detection shows that the shadow energy on the surface of the ruins of the city has more than doubled. That level of energy is enough to breed the undead on the ground. That's unlikely to be caused by Angramo. Otherwise, there would be no news at all. Something else must have happened. The black dragon wandered in the court, and the huge dragon claws stepped on the ground and made hollow echoes. After a pause, he squinted and said, "Interesting. We have stayed in the Underdark for so long. Is there something that we haven't discovered yet?" "Caesar, you have to be careful about this." Luna stood on his head and said to him, "The book says that whenever the shadow energy on the surface is rich, it means that a disaster is coming, and no mortal can stop it." The 22nd chapter of Bismay's Guide to Adventure. Caesar rolled his eyes, but he still could not see the little one on his head. "But according to the description in the book, we are the biggest disaster." "That seems to be the case." Luna's voice gradually trailed off. Although Angramo and the undead army under her command were not the main force of the Blackwing Empire, they were more than enough to destroy 1 or 2 other small cities in Iradia. Even so, they still lost contact with them in an instant. This was not a trivial matter, so Caesar decided to make a trip personally. This black dragon seemed to have no regard for anything, and barged into the ruins of Therengobi, which was already shrouded in shadow elemental. It opened the passage to the underground world in a barbaric manner, and burrowed in without thinking. Logically speaking, in the past, when faced with such a situation, Caesar would calculate and calculate every little thing, and then send his minions one after another to probe. Finally, he would more or less have an idea in his heart before taking action. However, the situation now was completely different. After experiencing the battle of the 3 gods, Caesar suddenly realized that as long as he did not take the risk of going to the astral plane, there were very few single creatures in Iradia that could threaten him, at least in the north. Since muscles and fists could solve the problem, using the brain to think was better put aside for now. What greeted his eyes was still the Underdark that was filled with fog and shadows, and the air was permeated with a sour smell of decay. Even though he had not visited for many years, Caesar was still familiar with this place. But other than that, he also detected a magic reaction floating around him, something that had never been there before. "Someone is spying on me," he thought. His hunting instinct gave Caesar an unreasonable sense of perception, and even this kind of gaze that was not mixed with any likes or dislikes would be discovered by him. The black dragon raised his head and looked around. It seemed that there was really a problem in this place. Caesar began to move forward. There were no living creatures so far, and in front of him was a vast and boundless empty land, with no end in sight. There were only decaying skeletons on the dark red ground. But as he moved forward, Caesar found that the number of skeletons on the ground was gradually increasing. The black dragon stopped to take a look. These did not look like skeletons that were born spontaneously in the undead domain, but more like undead creatures that had been annihilated. This was not rare, and Angramo liked to rely on this method to cultivate stronger skeleton soldiers. But the number was a little too much. At this moment, a large number of skeletons and spirits appeared at the end of the surface, like a late welcome party. But Caesar knew that they were not here to welcome him, because he also saw Boda corpses, soul-lock monsters, and other undead creatures that did not appear in the Underdark. And with his hunting instinct and psionic perception, he even saw demon-hunting spiders and balrogs, creatures that came from the abyss. Demonic invasion? This word that was very far away from himself popped up in Caesar's mind. In the various historical records of Iradia, the Otherworld Gate had long been completely sealed, and demons and devils had always only lived in epics and legends. But now, these abyssal creatures that were recorded in the Monster Encyclopedia had appeared in front of Caesar. "Ah, hello, visitor. I am Asliers, the Infernal Liege, the great being of the upper realm. Welcome to my domain, Black Dragon." Just as Caesar was thinking, a warm and deep voice rang out, reverberating across the dark red earth. I should be the one to say that. Caesar bared his fangs and faced the direction of the other party's true form. "Every inch of land here belongs to me. Demon of the abyss, answer me. Where are my people stationed here?" "Oh, I see. Then I apologize." Aslier spoke in Draconic, his pronunciation clear and perfect. "Are you asking about the skeletal dragon and its soldiers? Don't worry, I did not hurt them. Because the undead attacked me indiscriminately, I restrained them. If the misunderstanding is resolved, I am willing to return them their freedom." The situation was in a stalemate. Caesar thought of 1,000 possible scenarios, but he did not think that the other party would not only greet him, apologize, and even agree to return the captives. Logically speaking, shouldn't the demons of the abyss be chaotic and evil creatures as ferocious and violent as the five-colored red dragon? A fight should have happened when they met. "Well, I hope this misunderstanding has not killed our friendship in the cradle. Black Dragon, how should I address you, my friend?" Asliers continued. "Caesar Tangerine." Caesar said, "Are you a demon or a devil? Don't confuse us with those lowly devils. They're just slaves created by the gods to fight against us. Those insignificant dregs, pathetic prisoners, incompetent cowards." The Infernal Liege's voice suddenly became irritable and finally became a roar that shook the earth. "Damn it, damn it, damn it, I want to be friend with you, but why did you humiliate me? Why did you provoke me?" Chapter 376. Demons were the most unpopular creatures in the astral plane. They were extremely addicted to chaos and destruction, and posed a huge threat to the stability of the endless realms. They came from the abyss above the chaos sea and could not be completely eradicated. In order to stop the demons from continuing to invade the realms, the gods created another tool of war: demons. Demons were not called demons at first, but their ruthless nature and extreme order, as well as their long-term battle with the demons of the abyss, had eroded them from the abyss and turned them into pure evil demons. But even so, the devils were still loyal to their duty. No matter where they were, demons and devils were mortal enemies. The Hell of Bator blocked the exits of the bottomless abyss that led to various planes, allowing the demons that were filled with chaos and destruction to always hope to conquer it. At the very least, they had to occupy several levels of strongholds to build stable portals that led to the various material planes that awaited them. This war was not evenly matched. Demons were the original species of the universe, but demons were not. The number of demons in the abyss was much higher than the demons in the hell, and the combat ability of the demon lords was often above that of the demon lords. Even if they were difficult to control and had no discipline, their huge numbers and elite individual qualities could always make up for this weakness. Especially in such a war, a huge number of high-end forces could often determine the victory, so the demon army was mostly on the defensive most of the time, losing more than winning. The other forces of the Endless Realms understood the meaning of this war, which was why the devils would always receive support from various forces in this war that had lasted for countless years, maintaining the balance of power on both sides regardless of the good or evil of the helpers. Even if those helpers did not have any good feelings towards the devils of the nine-layered hell. And every time a demon appeared in a material plane, it meant that the war in the Hell of Bator was lost, and at least one of the teleportation nodes had been conquered, such as now. Caesar knew very well that Asliers was not an easy character to deal with. Unlike the descent of the gods' apostles, this was a powerful demon lord of the abyss and needed to be treated with caution. But what Caesar did not know was that after seeing him, Asliers was also muttering in his heart. Asliers' background was not to be underestimated. He was the lord of the 601st Abyssal Stratum, the king of Balrogs who controlled fire and destruction. He was one of the more famous archdemons in the bottomless abyss, and he had mastered the innate detection abilities of Balrogs. Even so, he could not probe the true strength of his opponent. This meant that his magic power was not enough to crush the other party. To be able to reach this level of the Black Dragon, he was at least an ancient dragon. To be able to stand tall in a place like the Abyss that was filled with slaughter and chaos, Azils had already possessed a high degree of intelligence like the other lords of the Abyss. At least he knew how to think. The Infernal Lord knew that in the long years, any opponent who could resist his abyssal magic would be extremely difficult to deal with without exception. However, as a famous great demon of the endless domains, how could he show fear at this time? It was just a giant dragon. Flames rose from the other side of the dark red sky, and then surged. Asliers revealed his majestic body that was hundreds of meters tall. 10,000 years ago, when I first stepped into Iradia, even the arrogant Quell Dorii had to call me king. At that time, this land did not have a dragon like you. Caesar looked up at him. Do you want another 10,000 years? You dare to provoke me. In the end, he was completely enraged by this strange black dragon's understatement. His original nature did not allow him to remain calm, and he decided to fight to vent his anger before saying, "Die, worm." Asliers waved his flaming long braid and roared. Balrogs appeared one after another wherever the flames passed, and they rushed towards Caesar while howling. Although these were just small fries to the Lord of the Abyss, it was a good choice to test the waters. Caesar looked at these demons that did not touch the ground and did not make any sound. In the next moment, the vibrating power of the plane exploded. It was as if the weight of a mountain had arrived in an instant. This large group of Balrogs suffered from the pressure of billions of pounds, and they were annihilated one after another in the midst of howling. But the instant disappearance of the soldiers did not frustrate Asliers. With the support of the abyssal magic, the Infernal Lord could summon batches of Balrogs with just a wave of his hand. The sky burned, and thousands of Balrogs threw fireballs, causing a rain of fire to fall from above the black dragon. That's all. Caesar sneered, and a series of powerful psionic energy smashed over, and the group of minions suffered heavy casualties. Ignorant reptile, you're just as arrogant as your pathetic ancestors. You'll never know what you're facing. A simple taunt could arouse the fury of any demon, and the magic storm began to rage. Look carefully, your doomsday, the gate of the abyss. Caesar's eyes became dignified. It seemed that there was really a problem in the abyss. The magic waves caused the void to distort, and a huge elemental black hole formed behind the Infernal Lord, and the gate to the lower realm opened. Countless demons from the 601 floor of the abyss swarmed out, from the low-level imps and alchemists to the high-level Balrogs and Syndemons. They clustered around Asliers, and soon the area was completely flooded. Caesar had a headache. This was not a matter that should be handled by him. The invasion of demons was not a small matter in any material plane, and it should have been cleared by the coalition of the gods. But the gate of the abyss appeared in his own territory. If he left it alone, the North would be messed up by these guys sooner or later. The incredible coincidence made Caesar speculate. Coupled with the fact that the kingdom of the evil dragon mother was in the depths of the Hell of Bator, he had reason to suspect that the Dragon Queen was behind this incident. Asliers. Caesar slowly rose into the sky and looked at the Infernal Lord. The bloody war has lasted for hundreds of thousands of years, and the gap in hell is not so easy to tear open. Can you tell me how you entered the main material plane? Ha! Black Dragon, you are afraid. Asliers roared with laughter, and the burning skull showed a proud look. As a great being from the upper realm, as long as I want. I have 10,000 ways to enter the material plane, and the ignorant you have no way to know. All right, Caesar nodded. Then I'll beat you to a pulp before asking. What are you joking about? The infernal lord stopped halfway, because the gate of the abyss opened again. Black Dragon tore the space with powerful psionic energy, and a shining city appeared behind him. Endless monsters roared and rushed into the war, and all kinds of ferocious dragons spread their wings and covered the sky. I am the Empire. Chapter 377. The war was about to break out. Of course, Caesar was not unprepared. Before heading to the Underdark, he had the Blackwing clan prepare for war in order to prevent himself from falling into the predicament of having too many enemies. Reality proved that this decision was unexpectedly correct. Countless Blackwing monsters joined the battlefield at the first moment, crowding under the narrow sky with the demons. This was an extremely rare large-scale war in Iradia's recent history. More than 200,000 demons and monsters of the Abyssal clan were thrown into the same battlefield. Even if the gods came personally, they would have no choice but to retreat in the face of so many sharp teeth and claws. Otherwise, it was very likely that they would fall in the terrifying waves of war. Asliers urged his army to advance forward. There was one thing he did not boast about. As a famous lord of the abyss, this king of fire demons was indeed an extraordinary existence that was rarely seen in the prime material plane. Although he did not have a divine position or divinity, the powerful magic of the abyss made legendary creatures not worth mentioning in front of him. If one had to classify such power into a level, demigod, this should be the most appropriate definition. In Caesar's combat ability assessment device, the infernal lord Asliers' value had reached 5,000, far surpassing any creature he had seen before. Even the apostle of the greater god of war, Qualquizad, only had a combat ability assessment of 2,000. On the other hand, the Black Dragon Emperor's level of strength was even more difficult to determine. Because he had completely digested the true blood of Tiamat, Caesar's life form had leaped from an ordinary dragon to an ancestral dragon. His flesh body, bloodline, and other powers had increased by more than one level. Originally, only the ancestral Black Dragon could control his innate abilities, but now, he could control them as if they were his own limbs. As long as Caesar was willing, the corrosive power that had just appeared in his bloodline could instantly change the landscape of an area. Although Caesar's body size had yet to reach the standard of the ancestral dragons that were several hundred meters long and roamed the astral world, in terms of physical strength alone, those ancient dragons and ancient dragons in the astral world would find it difficult to be his opponent. Perhaps only the experienced strength energy dragons would be able to suppress him. Although Caesar was still a long way from becoming a god, as long as he did not seek death, there were not many things that could suppress him. After all, he still had magic resistance and fusion fire. Those extraordinary creatures Caesar, such as Asliers now, could also fight. Caesar rose into the air. His huge wings suddenly flapped, and the skin on his neck quickly surged and swelled. When he opened his mouth, the place where he was turned into light. The periphery of the fusion breath was violently red, but the closer it was to the center, the lighter the color. At the center was a beam of shining white light, and the temperature was enough to vaporize marble in an instant. A powerful storm with destructive energy poured down like a terrifying, blazing sun. When this blazing sun landed in the midst of the demons, it turned from a shining silver white to a blood-red color. In an instant, thousands of demons were annihilated into ashes. Even the higher demons could not escape this fate. The speed of the loss made Asliers very angry. This black dragon had already given him too many surprises. First, he opened the void portal to summon a sea of monsters and beasts. Then, he showed extraordinary lethality. Asliers began to guide the magic of the abyss, trying to use magic to restrict the black dragon's unscrupulous output. However, it was quickly intercepted by Caesar's super-high resistance and disappeared without a trace. Caesar ignited the fusion fire. Brilliant golden threads appeared on the edge of every black scale, which made him look radiant. The golden waves of particles overflowing from the surface of his body were like burning bright, divine fire. Perhaps at this time, the black dragon was more suitable for the name of the Infernal Lord. When Caesar shuttled back and forth on the battlefield with deadly radiation, the number of demons destroyed in a few seconds was tens of thousands. Siren. This familiar scene awakened something. Aslier's body trembled slightly, and he could not help but say a name. There were less than 10 Hui dragons in the vast, endless realm. Each of them was a terrifying monster that made the gods tremble in fear. The famous death omen of the abyss, Siren, was one of them. Because he liked to feed on demons, this Hui dragon had entered the bottomless abyss more than once to hunt the powerful demon lords. He brought the deepest fear to the demons who liked to bring fear to others. But soon, Aslier's reacted. The one in front of him was not Siren, who made all demons tremble in fear. This guy was just a black dragon who looked a little like a Hui dragon. Putting on an act would not work on the Lord of the Abyss. The Infernal Lord roared and threw the shadow of the past to the back of his mind. He waved his flaming whip and rushed up with thunder and fire. His tall body was full of pressure, and he attacked Caesar from top to bottom. Several kinds of buff spells were cast on him. His tens of thousands of years of life and the competitive environment of the Abyss had given Aslier's endless combat experience. Putting aside his ability to cast spells, his melee skills could also make any legendary warrior fall head over heels for him. The flames on the whip drew a beautiful trajectory in the air, elusive but extremely accurate. Caesar felt a great threat. No matter if he was close to Aslier's body or touched by the whip, the incomparable flames would leave a burn on his body. The trouble was not over yet. Caesar found that the damage of his fusion breath was sharply reduced when it hit the Infernal Lord. Aslier's had the same strong energy resistance, and his semi-elemental body allowed him to deal with physical damage with ease. This kind of physique was almost perfect in battle, and conventional methods would not work on him. The eyes of the Inferno Overlord Aziliers were filled with a violent will. The Inferno Overlord Aziliers continued to burn his body with a never-ending firestorm, attempting to melt the black dragon's scales and armor. When the volcano-like fists came crashing down, even Caesar found it difficult to withstand. But the black dragon was not without a way to fight back. His huge body was also a burden, and Azrael's every attack was slow and sluggish. After familiarizing himself with his opponent's body and attacking methods, Caesar began to meticulously develop his own art of dismemberment. Every attack came at the perfect moment, catching the Balrog King off guard. The Balrog King would also bleed, and when the attack was deep and heavy, flame-like blood would splatter. The Infernal Lord swung his fists in the air, causing ripples of pain. Damn it! No one has ever dared to hurt the Infernal Lord like this. Puny dragon, you will pay the price for this. I thought demons don't feel pain. Caesar looked up and sneered. Azilier's furious roar reverberated throughout the entire space. I'm going to dry your flesh, tear off your wings, and squeeze your eyeballs out of your head. Very well. After suffering another heavy blow, the Infernal Lord suddenly retreated. His voice was no longer irritable, but calm and cold. I am Aslier's, the ruler of the 601st floor. Kings of the Abyss, listen to my call. Delicious blood is waiting for you and me to drink. The Infernal Lord opened his arms and made a gesture of hugging. In the midst of the flames, the gate of the Abyss appeared again. Chapter 378. The abyssal gate flickered, reflecting the shadow of death as a sense of impending doom rushed over. A layer of goosebumps appeared on Caesar's skin as countless dark and deep gazes crossed over and landed on his body. Those were the gazes of other abyssal lords from another world. They had responded to Aslier's call, attempting to land on Iradia through this node. This is bad. Caesar was alarmed. Just the Infernal Lord alone was troublesome enough, and he still did not have an absolute chance of winning. Even if only one more abyssal lord appeared, the black dragon's chances of victory would become slim. Moreover, it seemed that there was more than one abyssal lord that was about to cross over. The never-ending abyssal magic was madly squeezing the void, tearing open cracks and building portals. The firestorm roared again, and an unstable void appeared. Aslier's actions made Caesar somewhat horrified. He had to interrupt this spell. The spotless land began to brew, but the Balrog king could roughly guess the black dragon's plan. He had to buy enough time for himself. Aslier's raised his body, like a god commanding the earth. Hundreds of meters of earth fire soared into the sky, forming a cage that sealed the black dragon within. Aslier's chanted a spell, and thick and scorching clouds of fire formed in the sky. With a crackling sound, a rain of fire immediately fell. The Balrog King's flames had elemental properties, burning nonstop upon contact. Rip! The earth fire cage could not last even a second. Caesar's sharp claws tore through the flames and began to charge forward, each step causing the earth to wail. When extraordinary existences of this level fought at full strength, the prime material plane could hardly withstand their devastation. Shockwaves accompanied by lethal radiation swept across, dyeing the sky a brilliant gold. Wherever the black dragon passed, corpses were strewn everywhere. No demon could survive such intense radiation directly. The time had come. Caesar extended his claw and clawed, approaching the casting range of dustless lands. The abyssal gate was right above his head, and the king's decree arrived first. The flame monarch, who had been drifting in the abyssal plane all his life, did not know what gravity was. His body swayed, and he almost fell. After getting rid of the flame monarch's interference, the black dragon could now begin to clean up the void portal. Just as Caesar was about to use spotless land, the abyssal gate suddenly distorted violently, shrinking and disappearing almost instantly. It was so fast that it caught everyone off guard. Whether it was the Black Dragon Emperor or the Flame Monarch, both of them were stunned for a moment, their movements coming to a halt at the same time. "What's going on?" Caesar muttered in his heart, while Aslier's roared out loud. In that critical moment, the Balrog king tried again, attempting to construct a void portal a second time. However, his mana was wasted, and no matter how hard he tried, the abyssal gate never appeared again. This meant that something had happened on the other side of the legendary door, and the portal to hell had been closed. "Tiamat, you dare lie to me?" Aslier's flew into a rage after discovering this problem, roaring at the sky. "You won't get anything if you don't fulfill your promise. You dare lie to us? Sooner or later, the demon army will wash the illusory scale fortress in blood." It was common knowledge that the illusory scale fortress was the core of the evil dragon mother's divine kingdom, and also Tiamat's residence in Bator. Caesar took a deep breath. The appearance of the demons was not a coincidence. Aslier's words had revealed that the Flame Monarch was a great demon she had deliberately released from Bator, and the Underdark was also the land it had chosen to land in. "You're haunting me," Caesar cursed inwardly. The situation was now very clear. Tiamat had not forgotten about him, and after making an accurate assessment of his strength, the evil dragon mother had lured an abyssal lord into the prime material plane with his army, causing chaos in the north and allowing the Blackwing Empire to fight a war of attrition. Through the dark red sky, Caesar seemed to see Tiamat's mocking face. A abyssal lord was just right to deal with the black dragon. After many assessments, Aslier's was the best candidate to suppress Caesar, but if more demon monarchs were allowed to enter the prime material plane, Tiamat would not be able to control the situation, and she would also be pushed to the opposite side of the gods. The furious flame monarch chose to vent his anger on the black dragon. Aslier's opened his terrifying mouth, and a wild, killing intent swept through the entire space, causing the demons under his command to become even more excited. The flame monarch leapt up, bringing along a storm as he charged at the black dragon. Before his body came into contact, he opened his mouth and used purifying flames. The cone-shaped flame tide, mixed with white waves and black meteorites, was approaching. Caesar did not dare to be careless. If all of these attacks hit, even his body would be burned and necrotized. The demon monarch and the black dragon emperor exhaled at each other. The black dragon's heart, which was larger than a hound, was beating vigorously, transferring the fusion fire through the basal blood vessels into the sac and then into the throat. The external appearance was that Caesar had shrunk his neck, taken a deep breath, and then opened his mouth and exhaled. The collision of the flame stream and the arc of light was extremely dazzling. The two cones of energy intertwined at the widest part, white and orange flashing, the violent collision of particles causing the dragon scales to feel some pain. After a few seconds of stalemate, the arc of light gained the upper hand. After all, the flame monarch was not a warrior who specialized in breathing, and the fusion fire in Caesar's body was continuously supporting him. After realizing that he had lost, Asliers immediately retreated, and the black dragon swung its tail like a giant battering ram, breaking through the flames and lashing out with a loud bang. In the gap of the tail swing, Caesar activated fatal radiation. The explosive particles of death, with the black dragon as the source of the explosion, instantly rushed out of his body and swept out in all directions. Not only the demons, but also some of the Blackwing clan were affected. The storm of flames was dispersed, and the shadow of death licked the body of the flame monarch, the flame shell disintegrating into the air. At this rate, it was not impossible for them to fight for a day and a night, or even longer. However, in the meantime, the Underdark began to shake violently. The extraordinary energy produced by the battle between the two had reached a level that the small demiplane could not bear. In a violent shaking of the world, the border between the Underdark and the Prime Material Plane was shattered and connected to Iradia. Theron Gobi burst out with the most dazzling light. A series of violent explosions occurred in the ruins of the city that was originally located in the dark region. After the space was distorted, this place expanded rapidly. Magma and deep ravines replaced everything in this place. Enough! The furious Asliers smelled the scent of the Prime Material Plane, and the rage that filled his brain was finally suppressed by reason. He roared and controlled his body. "Stop! Have your soldiers retreat. Tell your demon to stop before we talk." Caesar's psionic energy formed a black hole, once again sucking in the demons below, cutting them apart. "I said stop." The thunderous roar spread throughout the battlefield. The demons obeyed the will of their king and began to retreat, forming a defensive formation. After the Blackwing clan received the order of the emperor, they withdrew their claws and fangs. Chapter 379. War was the choice of one side, while peace talks could only be facilitated if both sides were willing. Caesar did not have any good feelings towards the demons, but he did not hate them for no reason either. He had never thought of himself as Iradia's savior. If the demons of the abyss had not appeared in the north, he would not have paid any attention to them. After learning of the other party's combatability, he clearly knew that Asliers was a difficult person to deal with at this stage, and it was not wise to waste the strength of the empire on him. Caesar's mentality had a dark side, and this had never changed. Without the motivation of benefits, it was difficult for him to do something as arduous and unrewarding as exterminating the demons. As for the Balrog king, Asliers had originally wanted to destroy the entire north, but now that the gates of the abyss had closed and seemed difficult to open again, this meant that he had lost his backup force and could not get the support of other lords and soldiers from the lower realms. It seemed that he would not be able to return in the short term. Asliers had to consider his future. The Prime Material Plane had too many potential threats to the demons. There were endless adventurers, kind races, and gods. It was best to avoid unnecessary conflicts as much as possible. It was not a good thing to make an enemy of such a powerful dragon. Speaking of which, Asliers had not seen such a powerful dragon for a long time. This made him think that the Prime Material Plane had entered an era of extremely high energy levels after 10,000 years. No matter what, after a simple and crude conversation, both sides reached a truce agreement. Caesar led the Blackwing clan to retreat, while the demons retreated into the magma. Time passed, and under the gaze of many, the Blackwing clan and the demons of the abyss lived in this fragile and subtle coexistence for a year in peace. North, Blackstone Town. This town deep in the heart of the Northern Empire had only appeared for a little over half a year, but it flourished at an unimaginable speed. At first, it was just a resting place built by the predecessors, but as time passed, countless people from all over the continent arrived at this place every day. After a long time, this originally simple resting place slowly appeared on the map, turning into a city with a huge flow of people. After half a month's-long journey, the expedition team of the Kingdom of Grey Castle finally arrived at this town that had rapidly become famous in a short period of time. The reason they specially came here was that less than half a day's journey from the town was the majestic Blackstone Mountain in the Outer Realms. It was the residence of the Lord of the Abyss, the Balrog King Asliers, and the most powerful monster that people had ever known. Although the Dragon King, Black Emperor Caesar Tangerine, had appeared on the cover of the new Monster Illustrated Handbook, this guy had already established his country, so people subconsciously, therefore, exclude him from the list of monsters. There's actually a shop here. Grey Axe walked along the well-ordered street. From time to time, he could see various shop signs, taverns, weapon shops, and armor shops on both sides of the street. He even saw a gambling house. Isn't this the gathering place of the Demon Crusaders? Why isn't there any tension at all? Look at these people. Do you really think they have the ability to fight against demons? Most of them just want to try their luck. The dwarf next to him took a sip of wine and said, "But this place is quite interesting. According to the Great Elder, this is called a tourist city. The Red Castle is also doing well by relying on the Ledasanus Mountains. Our Grey Castle is miserable, no chance." The Red Castle, the Iron Castle, and the Grey Castle were known as the Three Castle Kingdoms. They were located in the swamps of the Middle East and were ruled by dwarves. They were famous for their jewels, wine, and high-quality weapons. They were also the countries that maintained good relations with the Blackwing Empire. I didn't expect there to be so many people here. The dwarf looked around and said, dwarves liked lively places, and this kind of atmosphere made them feel happy. But Grey Axe was an exception. He wrinkled his thick and short eyebrows and said, "Can it not be so many? Those bards, everywhere they spread the news of the Blackstone Mountain, and the closer we get to the north, the more there are." In the end, almost everyone said the same thing. I really don't know who gave the benefits. You said, his companion was interrupted halfway. A woman with a smile like a flower saw these new faces and quickly came up to promote. "Brave warriors, do you need a map of the Blackstone Mountain? Our adventure team has gone deep into the Blackstone Mountain several times, and we have detailed information. You can get it for only 2 silver. An adventure team that can go deep into the Blackstone Mountain would come here to sell a map?" Grey Axe snorted. He was very familiar with this trick, so he didn't give the other party any face. The main reason was that in his eyes, these humans who were taller than him by a few heads were too ugly. Their bodies were as thin and ugly as sticks, and a woman's body should be like a barrel to be attractive. They sent away the woman selling the map, but soon they were surrounded by more people. Elite team looking for warriors, at least at the level of a great warrior. Fire resistance preferred, dwarves preferred. A clear voice came into their ears. At this time, a mage attendant passed by in a high-profile manner. "Come, a legendary mage will lead the team to at least the 3rd floor of the Blackstone Mountain. You must meet the abyssal demons, 10 gold per person. We will leave immediately. Take the materials and treasures along the way. Buying demon horns, scales, claws. Any material, 5 silver per set. Don't miss this opportunity, only one day. Newcomers, don't listen to this guy. If you have these things, go to the public affairs office in the town center to sell them. 10 silver per set. The Blackwing Empire has been buying them." A passerby kindly reminded in a soft voice. Grey Axe received the reminder and looked up at the man. The man was holding a heavy hammer and was also a warrior. Grey Axe felt a sense of familiarity between them and began to talk to the man. After a conversation, Grey Axe finally cut to the chase. Buddy, why do you think the Northern Empire wants to buy the demon's body materials? Well, I don't know about this. The warrior drank a mouthful of wine handed to him by the dwarf. Maybe it's to study how to deal with the demons. Speaking of which, I'm very confused. Grey Axe continued to ask. Demons are not wild beasts. It's impossible that the Balrog King doesn't know that there's a punitive stronghold here. Aren't you afraid that the demons will take the initiative to attack? How could that be? The warrior smiled. People on the continent say that the Black Rock Mountain is a country within a country. However, those who are familiar with this place know very well that it's just a cage. The Northern Empire's army is stationed at the edge of the Black Rock Mountain. Under normal circumstances, the demons will not be able to get out. Then what if the situation is not normal? That's the Lord of the Abyss we're talking about. If the Balrog King insists on leaving the Black Rock Mountain by force, the army alone might not be able to stop it. Are you that relaxed? Makes sense. The warrior nodded. Then he asked, have you seen Emperor Black Dragon? Is there any connection between the two? I'm talking about the Balrog King. I suspect that most people here don't know how terrifying a Lord of the Abyss can be, as long as it's willing. If you've seen Emperor Black Dragon, you wouldn't think so. The warrior interrupted him and pointed at himself. I've seen him. The warrior continued. Besides, as you said, most people here don't come here for the Balrog King. Everyone just wants to try their luck in the Black Rock Mountain. The fiery crystals on the outer layer alone are enough to make people rich. The body parts of demons can also be sold at a high price in the small town. If you have the ability to go deep into the lower layer and search for the molten core, you won't have to worry about money for the rest of your life. The Black Rock Mountain is actually not a mountain, but an underground cave. Grey Axe pondered. According to what you said, which layer is the Balrog King on? No one knows for now. The warrior spread his hands and extended an invitation. However, my companions and I are prepared to take a risk and go deeper tomorrow. Dwarves, are you interested in joining us? Chapter 380. Tia Balshk retracted her wings and landed in Thorncastle. Her lackeys quickly swarmed up to her. Mistress, the barbarian Bone clan in the Eastern Wastelands has been acting strangely recently. Do we need to strengthen our defenses? It doesn't matter. The last batch of trade goods with the Elven Forest has been delivered to the castle. Should we send someone to deliver them to the court? Leave them there for now. Lord Sveigler, the Black Rock Mountain, sent news 2 days ago. Don't look. Tia left the dumbfounded Demodrons behind her and climbed onto the twisted iron chair in Thorncastle. She retracted her 4 unique wings and stared blankly ahead. The Demodrons trembled in fear. They did not know what their new powerful mistress was thinking. Rainbow wings, Tia Balshk Tangerine, a powerful red dragon with 4 wings. She was one of the first batch of radiation dragons hatched in the Empire's dragon nest. She was also the most powerful radiation dragon so far. She was appointed by the court as the guardian of the Eastern Wastelands and the new master of Thorncastle. None of this is important. After a long while, this radiation dragon that was born less than 3 years ago, but was already as big as the young red dragon spoke. Now, the most important matter in the Empire is Father's hibernation. As mentioned before, due to the complete digestion of the Tiamat's blood, the life form of the Black Dragon Emperor was close to that of the ancestral dragon species. Of course, the way the ancestral dragon species evolved was very different from ordinary true dragons, and even required more energy than a legendary dragon. The energy needed for the operation of the Empire's dragon nest, including the magic supply system of the various research departments in the court, as well as the magic support provided by the spellcasters, was almost all transferred to the underground of the court so that the Black Dragon Emperor could evolve in an environment rich in energy. However, excessive magic output would inevitably affect the environment. Before the evolution even began, there was already an eye-catching magic vortex in the sky above the court. How to conceal such a thing became a headache for Leon. In the end, The spellcaster still could not find a way to conceal such a large-scale magical reaction. Therefore, to prevent any accidents, the Imperial Court issued an order a day ago. The radiation dragons stationed in various places receive the news, and every Black King's bloodline must return to the dragon's lair immediately to act as a guard for the Emperor's slumber. Tia, who was standing at the top of Thorn Castle, looked at a corner of the castle. She then turned around and said with a calm expression, "I will be leaving for a while. Raise the alert level and take precautions against the barbarian Bone Clan. If necessary, ask the Blackwing Army for help. Don't disappoint me." After giving a few simple orders, Tia spread her wings and left. The same scene happened all over the Northern Empire. The Fortress of Despair, the Fey region, the green fields, the Black Rock Mountains. On this day, people could see all kinds of dragons flying overhead and gathering in the direction of the royal court. Imperial Dragon Lair. Underground, within the area sealed off. As soon as Caesar fell asleep, he could feel the changes in his body. He knew that this slumber would not be short. It would not be just 1 year. It might be longer than he expected, but it would not be more than 5 years. Holding on to the trust of the Imperial Guards, Caesar fell into a deep slumber. This guy's huge body was surrounded by an astonishing amount of energy. According to the rules, this black dragon's energy level had reached the peak of what Iradia could be born in the main material world. It should be noted that Caesar was only 40 years old this year. Even for humans with short lifespans, being able to reach such a level of energy at the age of 40 was definitely an achievement that could shock the world. Moreover, it was even rarer for a dragon. In terms of brain development, ever since he obtained psionic energy to strengthen his spiritual sea, Caesar's knowledge and methods in the field of energy had become more powerful. This also meant that his inability to cast spells had become less of a hindrance to him. After his body grew rapidly, Caesar's psionic ability was also in a state of rising tide. This also meant that he no longer needed Black Dream. He could now create his own command ability. At this moment, the fusion flame had already fused with Caesar's heart. This made Caesar's heart look very strange. If a dragon scholar were to dig open the black dragon's chest to examine it, they would probably be so shocked that they would not be able to speak. The huge black dragon's heart was filled with concentrated energy, while the many crystallized blood vessels were in charge of connecting to the black dragon's organs. The thick and tough blood vessels' outer walls were becoming transparent and glowing under the nourishment and scouring of energy. This wondrous heart had shockingly become a huge light source and appeared to have the potential to evolve further. If one were to dig out Aslier's Balrog's heart for comparison, one would find that the two hearts were actually the same. It was proof of extraordinary power. Powerful energy pulsed rhythmically in this half-crystallized heart, with Caesar's breathing gradually spreading throughout his body. The underground, without any light source, was soon drowned in flashes of light. The huge ball of light kept emitting nuclear radiation, which caused the entire underground cavern to undergo wondrous changes. The rough cavern walls were constantly being corroded and melted, while the underground river became unbearably turbid. Moreover, the temperature rapidly rose, and soon, this place became a karst cave where terrifying monsters resided. Caesar swayed his tail unconsciously, snoring as he dozed off. As the light on his body flickered, his body expanded at a speed visible to the naked eye, and then contracted in a strange pattern. The adaptive system allowed this terrifying monster to maintain balance, naturally adjusting in an orderly manner. The structure of his body also became even more wondrous. This half-crystallized effect seemed to be transmitted from his heart to his brain, including his nervous system, until his organs, blood, bones, and muscles all became translucent. However, this process seemed to be unimaginably long. The crystallization of every part took 10 days to half a month, and by the time the process was almost complete, an entire year had passed in the outside world. When Caesar's body no longer glowed and no longer expanded or contracted, this guy had become a huge monster with a body length of 50 meters. This was the largest black dragon that Iradia could see so far. The accelerated growth of his body allowed Caesar to enter adulthood, and the consequences of various mutations caused the remaining characteristics of the black dragon on Caesar's body to completely disappear. Even without his abnormal body shape, no one would think that he was the same species as Garen or Caesar. In order to deal with stronger and stranger enemies in the future, Caesar's adaptive unit strengthened his brain to a higher degree. The black dragon's nervous system became extraordinarily resilient as it constantly collapsed and reformed, and because of the crystallization, it had some extraordinary characteristics. Its reliability and ability to resist soul invasion were far beyond that of legendary creatures. Chapter 381. When Caesar regained consciousness, the adjustment of his body was basically complete. He could acutely feel the changes in his brain. Not only had his mind become sharper, even his reaction speed had increased by a level, stepping into the level of a true extraordinary creature. If it was said that it was a little difficult to fight the Balrog King before, the Black Dragon would basically have the advantage if they fought again. On the other hand, Caesar could feel that his body's ability to react and control energy had also reached a new level, reaching a whole new level. It was as if with just a thought, all the power in his body would boil and burst out. The combat ability assessment device had already evaluated his various abilities at this stage. Caesar looked at the data, his confidence rising spontaneously. With his current level, Iradia's ordinary red dragon, gold dragon, blue dragon, silver dragon, and even an immemorial dragon would not be his match. The gigantic abyssal dragon opened its vertical eye that had double pupils and slowly awakened its body. Because of its awakening, the boiling radiation in the blink of an eye calmed down. Caesar shook his head and climbed up from the ground, feeling the power that had leaped into a whole new level. In fact, Iradia did not have the concept of extraordinary. It was just a general term, and there was no clear description in the astral plane. Regarding this power that far surpassed legends and had yet to reach the level of gods, the various prime material worlds had very different descriptions. There were demigods, evil beings extraordinary. There were too many to mention, but who was stronger and who was weaker would only be known after a fight. Caesar blinked, an idea suddenly appearing in his mind. Should he come into contact with the astral plane? Every prime material world was like a strictly managed city. It was very difficult for foreign species to enter, and they had to pay an unimaginable price. However, it was very easy for native creatures to pass through the realm walls, and the astral plane's gates were always open for material world creatures. Forget about it. Very quickly, the black dragon suppressed his tiny curiosity. He was a rational dragon, not to mention that the light of divine authority shone everywhere in the astral plane. Caesar, who had climbed to the top of the pyramid of Iridia with great difficulty, would be reduced to a lamb waiting to be slaughtered if he went to the astral plane. Caesar did not have such fetishes, nor did he have any fetishes to challenge stronger opponents. What he wanted was to stay in his own nest comfortably. After thinking this point clearly, Caesar climbed out of the underground cave. However, in this simple movement, his body suddenly had a strange feeling of disharmony. Something was not right. The black dragon stopped and lowered his head to inspect his body. However, when he tried to concentrate, he found that the negative emotions of mania, itchiness, and impulsiveness all rushed into his brain. The black dragon's eyes shot out a cold red light, and the energy materialized like a sharp sword, leaving two deep marks on the ground in front of him. Caesar could not see his own appearance, but this kind of energy release was not what he wanted to do. This was a manifestation of his will not being able to control his body. After realizing this, his mania became even stronger, and his body was filled with the urge to destroy. He had a feeling that he wanted to turn this place upside down. Calm down. Caesar gritted his teeth and suppressed his irritation. Tiamat's blood, Maler's divinity, and the dream monster. What went wrong? After a nervous inspection, Caesar heaved a sigh of relief. There were no problems. The fusion heart was perfect. Whether it was Tiamat's blood or Maler's divinity fragments, they had been completely absorbed and digested. The strange dream monster did not appear either. The real problem was actually him. Spring, the revival of all living things, and it was mating season again. As a dragon, a powerful dragon that had developed beyond its normal limits, Caesar had actually had a strong desire to mate a long time ago. However, this fellow was very strange. He seemed to be more or less resistant to this aspect. Using a powerful control unit, he firmly suppressed his desire to mate. However, being suppressed did not mean that it was eliminated. As his body grew stronger and fully matured, the desire to mate of a dragon would inevitably reappear and become even stronger. This was the inevitable result of life, and it had nothing to do with where the soul came from. From a certain point of view, reproduction was one of the most important purposes of life. This was because other than the immortal gods, in the long process of evolution, all species that did not have the purpose of reproduction had gone extinct. For every living species that existed, whether it was lizards, dragons, goblins, or titans, reproduction was an instinct that could not be suppressed. So now, every gene in Caesar's body was roaring, "Mate, reproduce." Caesar circled the underground cave twice, snorted twice, and began to walk out. Almost instantly, the black dragon passed through the passage at the bottom of the Empire's dragon nest and appeared at the top of the mountain. It was the rainy season in the north. Caesar stood at the top of the highest mountain in the Empire's dragon nest. His 50-meter-tall body was like a nightmare in the middle of the night when lightning flashed occasionally. He lowered his head and looked down at the north in the night rain. He felt that it was not a solution to go on like this. It was better to go and find Luna to solve the problem first. This place was heavily guarded, and the vibration at the bottom of the dragon nest naturally attracted the attention of the Empire's security forces. Caesar only stood on the mountain for a short while, and immediately, many of the Black King's blood descendants arrived one after another. They all came up to him and said, "Your Majesty, the whole North is waiting for your return. Well, remove the security and return to your original place." Caesar did not have the time to deal with these radiation dragons. After giving a few simple orders, the fellow immediately spread his wings and returned to the Blackwing court as fast as lightning. After he left, several female radiation dragons sniffed the air, and their expressions immediately became excited, as if staying together for a long time would lead to telepathy. Luna was not sleeping on her little bed at this time. Instead, she stayed in the garden in the backyard of the court, tending to the flowers and plants. The night rain pattered down, but could not drip on her body. It was one of the forest sprite's few inconspicuous little abilities. Caesar fell from the sky with a rumble, smashing into the open space at the entrance of the garden. The tremor he set off was no less than a level 20 storm for Luna. Fortunately, the black dragon was prepared in advance. Psionic energy appeared around the little one first, gently wrapping her up and bringing her before him. Looking at the ferocious monster shrouded in scales and thorns, the little one beamed and ran up to touch his face. "Ah, Caesar, you're finally awake. Sigh, you're really getting uglier." Caesar looked at the little Luna, who was less than 1/100th of his height, with a burning gaze. Hearing her say so, he was even more certain of his thoughts. "What? You can't look at dragons with the beauty of sprites." "Oh, right, after this slumber, I'm also an adult." Luna looked into Caesar's eyes, as if suddenly realizing something, and then cheered. "Then can we get married?" She left the psionic barrier on her own accord, flapping her little wings and circling around the black dragon's head. "How many little sprites do you think we should have in the future?" "Oh no, you're a dragon, so we can only give birth to little dragons." "Sigh, if that's the case, will I lay eggs? I've never heard of a sprite trying it before. We'll be different. It just feels weird. Besides, mating with a sprite definitely can't give birth to a pure-blooded dragon. You don't mind, right?" And oh. Chapter 382. True dragons were, in a sense, perfect creatures. Ever since dragons appeared in the endless realms, there had yet to be any species that had reproductive isolation with them. In other words, true dragons could mate with any creature and give birth to offspring, even ants. The traits of their offspring depended on the racial traits of their parents. The word partner was still somewhat sacred to Caesar. Regardless, marriage was a great contract that implied a certain degree of sharing of resources, mutual respect, and shared hardships. Therefore, the goal of marriage was especially important. He and Luna had watched each other grow up, and the little fellow was his best and only choice. Caesar had been hesitant before. As a dragon, he was always full of insecurity. He did not want to expose Luna to the gaze of his enemies before he had enough power. But now, Caesar felt that the time was ripe. Dragons of this age would definitely find a partner. It was about time that the Northern Empire needed a queen. Soon, the Elven Forest received a huge amount of betrothal gifts. The relationship between Luna and the Black Dragon Emperor was no secret in the Elven Forest. Still, Luna's parents were rather reluctant and were afraid of this son-in-law no matter how they looked at it. But after repeatedly asking Luna for confirmation, they finally agreed to the marriage. Then, the court officials conveniently made an announcement that the Empire was about to welcome its mistress. The famous Dragon King was actually going to marry a puny and weak forest fairy. This news was treated as a legend by many, and they spread it everywhere. Due to some special reasons, humans were the creatures that understood the true dragons the most, aside from the true dragons themselves. In all the books and records about the true dragon's first mate was usually a true dragon of the same species or some other particularly powerful creature. Very few true dragons would choose a humanoid creature as their first mate, and a true dragon that chose an endangered species like the forest fairies as their mate had never appeared in history. But whatever the case may be, it was merely a topic for gossip. Ordinary people could not interfere with the Black Dragon Emperor's decision. And after the court made the announcement, Caesar had Ryan lead the boars to build a new city for Luna. It was a transit city built from the imperial court and connected to the western coast. The city was named Galanaud, translated in Elven as Northern Star. Forest fairies had different customs from humans. The fairies did not forbid mating with their partners before marriage, but it had to be done after reaching adulthood. So before the wedding date was set, Caesar and Luna had already begun their dragon-making project. The mating between a dragon and a fairy was quite troublesome. Fortunately, Luna also knew how to use magic, so she could also change her body to a certain extent. She could make herself the same size as a normal human, or even a little bigger. Forest fairies all had the typical gentle and beautiful style of the East. Luna's personality did not make her appear particularly attractive, but she was the type that Caesar liked the most. In order to make the little one more psychologically acceptable, Caesar turned into a rare human form, intending to spend a wonderful night with Luna in a way that was commonly used by humanoid creatures. In fact, this was not necessary, because on the second night, Luna turned into a small silver dragon. The world was not static. Just as Caesar was enjoying his time, the distant empire on which the sun never sets was also moving. Long ago, Emperor Enrique had realized the possible threat of the Blackwing Empire. After spending as long as 3 years conducting a detailed investigation, Enrique had a considerable understanding of the country's operating mode, military strength, economic level, and so on. Not long ago, in the floating city of the empire on which the level of development was unparalleled, the emperor gave a public speech. Everyone, the empire on which the sun never sets is now at the pinnacle of the world's power, and has been for nearly 2,000 years. This is the result of the joint efforts of our ancestors and us. But with great power comes great responsibility. Now, we are facing a serious situation that has never been seen before. The core of Enrique's speech was the rising of the northern otherworldling kingdom, which would become a great threat to the survival of mankind in the future. He emphasized that no matter where you are in Iradia, whether it is a direct or indirect threat to mankind, is closely related to the empire on which the sun never sets. In order to maintain his position as the overlord of Iradia, Enrique ordered that the development of the northern otherworldling kingdom must be curbed. Soon, the unsetting empire began to ban all trade with the north in their country. At the same time, they also requested their allies, the free trade city-states, the Three Castle Kingdom, and other affiliated countries to cut off all trade with the north. After popularizing the foreign species threat theory, the unsetting Sun Empire stated that in order to maintain regional stability, the western, central, eastern, and central regions of Aladia needed to guard against the dragon's military invasion. They began to send more troops to strategic fortresses in various regions. As the largest trading nation in the northern otherworldling kingdom, the Free City-State received the greatest amount of interference from the empire. Although the authorities knew that cutting off trade with the northern otherworldling kingdom would result in great losses, the Free City-State and the empire on which the Free City-State had a long history. It could be said that the Free City-State was supported by the empire. Therefore, after Chancellor de Chammer was invited to the empire on a friendly visit, the two sides reached an agreement after a series of exchanges of interests. The Free City-State cut off all trade with the northern otherworldling kingdom. The other smaller nations were even more obedient. The closer they were to the south, the faster they cut off all trade with the northern otherworldling kingdom. If marked on a map, the trading nations of the northern otherworldling kingdom were now dark. Only the kingdom of the Dwarven Kingdom in the swamps was still wavering. All these actions were carried out and completed within a week, catching the northern otherworldling off guard. This series of actions meant that the empire on the northern otherworldling kingdom was isolating the northern otherworldling kingdom politically, economically, and militarily. It was necessary to curb the expanding influence of the Blackwing Kingdom and suppress its growing momentum of development. Wherever there were northerners, the empire on the northern otherworldling kingdom would declare that the place was under the influence of the dragons or the threat of the otherworldlings. They would immediately exert political pressure and even forcefully send out troops to intervene. In an instant, the northern otherworldling kingdom was in a state of panic. Many merchants from the northern otherworldling kingdom were sent back, and the otherworldlings that were originally active in the outside world, such as the orcs and flying apes, were quickly driven away, imprisoned, and even slaughtered. Chapter 383. When the first ray of sunlight shone on the north, Caesar opened his eyes. It was rare for him to use a normal human's biological schedule. Luna, who was sleeping, was dissatisfied with his departure and turned over. She pouted and mumbled in her sleep. Caesar kissed her forehead and played with Luna's little wings a few times before leaving. Putting aside the various sacred meanings, mating was a beautiful thing, whether it was for him or Luna. However, it did not mean that they should indulge in it. As time passed, as long-lived species, they had plenty of time to spend together. Caesar returned to his original size and walked into the palace. Black Dragon's good mood did not last long. "Your Majesty, without any warning, the central city-states have cut off all trade with us. At the same time, the Hajin Kingdom, including Drington, Farley, and Este, have all blocked all information exchange with the Empire. Although the Three Castle Kingdom in the swamps has an unclear attitude, it seems that they intend to follow suit." Wren held a stack of parchment and reported the recent situation on the continent to Caesar. After a country had developed to a certain extent, the flow of capital and assets was an indispensable part. However, controlling the flow of capital within a region was not enough to support the development of the empire. Therefore, foreign trade was a very important part of the Blackwing Empire. Currently, the Blackwing Empire's trade was very complicated. It traded with the Three Castle Kingdom for gems and ores, with the trading city-states for silk, cloth, and people, and with the eastern countries for food. At the same time, the Blackwing Empire also imported large quantities of raw materials from other countries and then exported assembly line industrial products. Not only was the volume of trade huge, but there were also many types of trade. If one had to record them all in detail, it would take a day to finish writing. The nature of the countries in the continent could be roughly divided into three types: the distribution countries at the top of the pyramid, the manufacturing countries in the middle, and the energy countries at the bottom. The Blackwing Empire had already broken away from its original status as an energy country, where the countries in the north relied on simply selling food, fur, minerals, and other raw materials. Under the various policies of the Black Dragon Emperor, it had transformed into an industrial manufacturing country. Such a transformation obviously allowed it to earn more profits and allow its economy to develop faster. However, a country in such a position needed to participate in trade. Cutting off its trade network was equivalent to cutting off its lifeline. Ever since the establishment of the Blackwing Empire, it had never taken the initiative to provoke any other countries. It also maintained a low-key and friendly attitude toward other countries. Thus, it had always been smooth sailing when it came to establishing diplomatic relations, trading, and a series of other national affairs. It had not encountered any major setbacks. The trade network had already been formed for a period of time. Logically speaking, it was impossible for it to instantly disappear into thin air. Unless this is an attack with a leader, a plan, and a purpose. Caesar stared at the huge map hanging on the wall and thought, Tiamat? That was not very likely. The Blackwing Empire's trading nations were mostly made up of humans. As a dragon god, the evil dragon mother could not possibly possess such great power. Colquisite? This god of war might have the ability to do so, but he was currently too busy to take care of himself. He could not get rid of Tiamat's entanglement. He should not have the time to care about the matters of the prime material plane. Marat? Forget it. The god of the hunt really did not have any cards to play in Iradia. Caesar could not think of any other enemies he had offended who had the ability to do such a thing. The black dragon was silent for a while, then said, What other news is there? The shapeshifters we have planted in various countries must know more. The relevant information was too little. Caesar could not find anything useful in his memories. However, he had a premonition that what they were about to face this time was not as simple as a fight. He needed more information to make a comprehensive judgment. The alien threat theory. What? Caesar did not understand and asked in return. On the 145th day of the third era of Iradia, 1665, that is, 2 weeks ago, the ruler of the empire where the sun never sets, Enrico Lachlan, issued a public speech pointing out the urgency and necessity of guarding against the alien threat. It has now been widely circulated and is known as the alien threat theory, Wren explained with a bow. He then used magic to place a crystal in the palm of his hand. Your Majesty, we have obtained the video and written records of this speech. Do you want to take a look? Give it to me, Caesar said thoughtfully, then opened the video record without hesitation. Humans have no way of knowing what dragons, giants, and other species are thinking, what they want to do in the future, where their desire to kill and invade ends, if there is an end. The Titans once ruled the land, the dragons once ruled the land, and the orcs once ruled the land, but without exception, it was a dark era full of blood and bones. We must not let this happen again. Enrico was a charming and majestic monarch. Everyone knew that this great emperor had been on the throne for a long time, but he still maintained his youthful appearance and vitality. His crown was a simple and bright silver crown, inlaid with large diamond-shaped rubies. Although he was a skinny southerner, he was even taller than the northerners. His golden eyes and golden hair made him look very majestic. It was said that the blood of the sun god flowed in his body. I see. Caesar did not show any anger or impatience. He quietly listened to the whole speech and then smiled in a low voice. Although the whole speech did not mention the North or Black Dragon, in fact, this so-called otherworldling threat theory was actually aimed at the Blackwing Empire. So, the cause and effect of the whole incident made sense. The unfallen empire was the well-deserved authority and hegemony of Iradia. When it spoke, other countries had to be cautious. If it was an ordinary dragon, whether it was a chromatic dragon or a metallic dragon, after knowing that they had been set up for no reason, they would probably roar and give a bloody lesson to the rebels who offended the dragons. But Caesar did not. He just calmly held the image crystal in his claws and then leaned on the throne and pondered. After learning that the never-setting sun empire was in charge of everything, Caesar instantly figured out the cause and effect. It was reasonable and logical for the never-setting sun empire to come from the never-setting sun empire. Moreover, it was almost inevitable. Although the Blackwing Empire did not have any grudges with the never-setting sun empire, the ruler of this overlord country would not allow the Black Dragon's strength to grow so quickly. Looking at it from another perspective, even if Caesar were to become the overlord of Eladia, he would not sit by and watch another force that was not under his control grow. Of course, after knowing who the opponent was, the whole story was no longer important. The most urgent thing now was that if the status quo was maintained, the Blackwing Empire would quickly weaken, and in the end, it might even face the serious consequences of collapse and disintegration. He had to find a way to break through the blockade of the rising sun as soon as possible. There was no way to fight. Not to mention that the Blackwing Empire was unlikely to defeat the rising sun, which had developed to its peak. Once the Blackwing Empire took the initiative to attack the south, it would confirm Enrique's otherworldling threat theory. At that time, the human countries would fear the north like a tiger and hate it like a snake. Unless the whole of Iradia was defeated and conquered, there was no way to end the situation. With Caesar's current ability, he could not do that, so he had to think of another way. Chapter 384. Challenging the empire on which the sun never sets was not an easy task. This country, which had stood for more than 1,000 years and pushed the magic civilization to the extreme, was worthy of being the overlord of Iradia. Although its territorial border was in the south, its actual influence had radiated to most of Iradia. If one wanted to play with it in the area under its control, one would either have to obey the rules set by it or be expelled and blocked, just like the northern countries. But it was not that there was no solution. In the Blackwing Palace, Caesar threw the image recording crystal that had been sent back to Ryan. The clan leaders in the palace had different expressions and different thoughts. The half-lich was the first to speak. The instigator of this incident is the empire on which the sun never sets. It is the most powerful force in Iradia today. Even if His Majesty is now close to a god, we may not be able to be its enemy. There are too many things we don't understand there. Then we just watch it do this and let Father's empire slowly die? Angramo said discontentedly. After the truce with the Flame Devil King, the skeletal dragon was released as agreed, but Angramo's resistance at that time caused her body to be crushed by Asliers, and she had to change to another skeleton carrier. Of course, I didn't mean that. Ryan's rotten face smiled at her with a strange expression. This guy had a morbid love for Angramo, so his tone in front of the skeletal dragon was always different from usual. We can first lie dormant, endure for a while, and take the initiative to send a friendly message to the empire on which the sun never sets. It doesn't matter even if we have to pay some price. Whether it is His Majesty or us, we can afford it. When the time is right, we will destroy that country. Hogg heard this and shook his head. Before Angramo could refute again, he had already expressed his opinion. It's not that simple. Whether it is this generation, the next generation, or the next generation in power in the empire on which the sun never sets, it is unlikely that there will be muddle-headed and incompetent fools. The humans outside the north have the greatest degree of vigilance and hostility towards us, and will never let our country grow. If it's really like what you said, maybe it's just in line with the Rising Sun City's intention. They can immediately take an inch and take a mile to block us, making us weaken at a faster rate. In addition to the clan leaders, many radiation dragons were also expressing their opinions. They were all surnamed Tangerine, and in a sense, they were all children of Caesar. There was no doubt about their loyalty. Apart from their short lifespans and inability to have children, the intelligence level of the radiation dragons was definitely not lower than that of the true dragons. These factors allowed them to also be part of the decision-making level of the empire. Caesar looked thoughtfully at the slightly noisy palace hall. He raised his claw and pressed it down. Only then did the noise in the hall gradually die down. Everyone looked at the Black Dragon Emperor, who had not spoken all this time and kept their mouths shut. At present, being an enemy of the empire on which the sun never sets is not part of the plan. Caesar's gaze swept across the clan in front of him one by one, but it has already launched an action against the north. If this situation continues, with the trade blockade and economic sanctions, the chips in our hands will become less and less, and the possibility of resistance will become lower and lower. These greedy human beings, if we take a step back, they will go further and further until we have no way to retreat, just like the Orc Empire in the past. In fact, Caesar was in a good mood now. Seeing that the Black Wings leaders had their own ideas, not only was he not upset, on the contrary, he was very gratified. Because in the years of baptism, the clan leaders had also grown at a speed visible to the naked eye, so that the Black Wings Empire that he had tried his best to maintain finally had the appearance of a country. So the Black Wings Empire will never show a weak posture to the rising Sun City. Caesar said in a deep voice, "But I don't think you have the ability to fight against the South at present. So what you should consider is how to delay the war as much as possible and break through the blockade of the rising Sun City on the north." The ancient red dragon Kadozi, who had not spoken all this time, picked up the recording crystal from the table in front of Caesar's throne and looked at it again before saying, "The threat of different species. They categorize all species other than human beings as different species? From a certain level of interpretation, can it be understood that they reject all species other than human beings? Caesar, I think we can take advantage of this." The true dragon's brain circuit was different from others, and his statement was also different. The rising Sun City is indeed the supreme existence of Iradia. Even I, as the red dragon, admit this. It has once rebelled against the gods and hunted demons, and its strength is beyond doubt. But this does not mean that Iradia will have the final say. This threat of different species can completely push it to the opposite side of thousands of races. Barrett, who had been listening and had no sense of existence, smacked his lips and whispered, "Your Majesty, do you need the publicity department to do some work?" Caesar nodded. "Of course, we need more strength. Even if those races did not join the Black Wings in the north, at least their attitude towards human beings would change. In short, they must discuss the rising Sun City and not let those damn Southerners live so comfortably." The establishment of the publicity department in advance was one of his most correct decisions so far. The power of words and public opinion could always be reflected in quiet places. Before, in the development of Blackstone Town as a tourist city, the publicity department also played a decisive role. I think, whether it is the 3 castles of Swamp, the trading city-states, or the countries of Hejian, they have no prejudice against the North. The reason why they cut off contact with the North is because they have a close relationship with the rising Sun City. In this various relationship chain system, the rising Sun City is at the core, and they have to bow their heads to it. Caesar began to order. To be honest, this has alerted me. Whether it is now or in the future, if we want to compete with our opponents, the Black Wings Empire must form its own faction and build its own fortress. From now on, the Empire will support the Elven Forest and the Wolfheart clan to build their own countries. Let them become neighbors of the Black Wings Empire, and help them to publicize and absorb the power of Iradia, other elves, and the Wolfheart clan. Also, give a certain amount of support to those countries close to the north and rebuild a new trade network. At the same time, all departments must give the shape-shifting monster clans the greatest amount of help, accelerate the infiltration plan of the central countries, and even the rising Sun City. Cutting off trade with the Black Wings Empire will not only cause us to lose, those countries will also not gain any benefits. I don't believe that there are no voices of opposition within them. Use those voices. The orders were issued one by one, and there were fewer and fewer people in the palace. From time to time, the leaders of the clans and the upper echelons of the empire left with the orders. Renee was silent for a while and asked, "Your Majesty, will the impact be too great? Such a tough attitude may cause the empire on which the sun never sets to take more radical measures." The supply line is too long. Even with the existence of the teleportation gate, the Empire will not be able to cross the continent to wage war. Caesar glanced at Renee. Other than that, what else can it do? Oh, right. As he spoke, he looked at his sister Blakesia and brother Garen, who were in charge of the coastal fleet. Last time, didn't a captain say that on the other side of the West Sea, there's a new continent with infinite possibilities? Send a fleet to take a look. Chapter 385. Kendo stood on the rooftop of the command room on the bridge and looked at the long fleet behind him, his heart pounding. Other than the huge ironclad flagship, the Empire's grasp, the other ships were also made of iron armor. Although these scouting ships, frigates, and supply ships were only equipped with 1 or 2 sets of weapons and were not even 1/5 the size of the flagship, when hundreds of them were gathered together, it was still a magnificent sight. White smoke billowed out of the chimneys amidst the low moaning from time to time. The seawater was also parted by this massive fleet. The bow of the ironclad warships was steadier than the magic-guided warships. The undulations when they broke through the waves were lighter than expected, giving them an unstoppable momentum. As the flagship, Empire's grasp was definitely the most eye-catching existence in the fleet. On the top of it, the black wing flag that symbolized the Northern Empire was hung high. The towering bridge and the slender body made it different from the common paddle steamers and ironclads. The towering turret and the super main cannon of 406 mm caliber at the front of the hull could launch super heavy armor-piercing shells of 2,700 pounds. The dozens of independent cannons and machine guns could attack the enemy from any direction without any blind spots. However, even though it was equipped with such a complicated weapon system, the high-pressure steam engine that had been processed by magic and the propeller power allowed it to sail on the sea at a high speed without losing speed, even when its strength was astonishing. In the current era, the Empire's grasp and its 2 companions, the breath of the Holy Dragon and the Northern Dawn, were definitely worthy of being called the overlords of the sea, even if their opponents were magic-powered warships. However, Kendo raised his head and looked at the giant dragon circling above the fleet. He then lowered his head and sighed. The Blackwing Empire had the ability to create such powerful warships, but they were held back by the lack of manpower and talent. At this stage, the northern lands were still unable to provide a large number of navigators, cannoneers, and other sailors. After all, as the captain of the Empire's grasp, not only did he have to take on multiple roles, but he also had to go to various academies to teach. It was not hard to imagine how lacking the talents in the northern lands were. That was also the reason why only the Empire's grasp fleet was sent to the ocean voyage. The personnel of the Breath of the Holy Dragon and the Northern Dawn were still in the running-in phase. Let's hope that the development of the Voyage project will encourage more people to join this industry, Kendo thought. After all, the sea is a man's romance. The destination of the Empire Grasp Fleet was Villister, a continent that didn't belong to Iradia. 1,000 years ago, the continent was already called that. Back then, the fleets of the Empire on which the sun never sets had already set foot on that land. However, due to certain reasons, the Southerners had given up on exploring and expanding Villister. Currently, the more reliable explanation was that the elemental reaction in Villister was not active. It could even be said that it was lifeless, making it difficult for spellcasters and magical products to work there. The natives there were primitive and ignorant, and it was difficult to communicate with them. However, their physique far exceeded that of the Iradia. They held extreme hatred for outsiders, and once they came into contact with them, war would break out. After some evaluation, the Sun Never Set Empire judged that Wylist had no value and stopped their plans. Later, the trading city-states also came to Villister, and the historical records they left behind proved this theory. Kendo had followed an adventuring caravan and successfully reached the continent. Although they didn't dare to go too deep, they successfully left behind a map of the sea and a small part of Villister. Later, when he enlisted in the army, he presented it to the Black Dragon. When the Black Dragon received the map, He only took a few glances at it before indicating that Crendo could leave. He didn't show any interest in the new continent, which disappointed Crendo. He was depressed for a period of time because of this. However, now, the Blackwing Empire, this new and large country, had finally set its sights on the depths of the sea. On the other side of the sea was a vast new world outside of Iradia. There were several difficulties in crossing the sea, such as self-replenishment, disastrous weather, and attacks by sea monsters. Among them, the unpredictable weather and powerful sea monsters in the deep sea were the most worrisome problems. However, the more one worried about something, the more likely it was to encounter it. When he received an emergency message from the command room, Crendo knew that there was work to be done. The weather on the sea suddenly changed. The originally clear weather was replaced by a dazzling white light that flashed across the sky. Thunder rumbled, and dark clouds filled the sky like a tide. Soon, rain began to fall. "Sir, there's news from a scouting ship. There's a situation ahead. There's something approaching us. There's quite a lot of them." In fact, even without him saying it, Crendo could see it himself through the Empire's Grasp's magic tracking system. Countless black shadows were approaching the fleet from the bottom of the sea. They were moving very quickly. These things came from all directions like sharks that had smelled blood. "Inform everyone to get ready," Crendo said in a low voice. Long before they left the port, he had already mentally prepared himself for any unexpected situations. The fleet was not a pushover either. Everyone on board had more than one battle experience and battle training. Before the two sides came into contact, the dragons circling above rushed into the sea first. When it came out of the water again, there was a huge, strange fish in its mouth. Dark Twin stars Blakesia, Emperor Black Dragon's twin sister. Her mission was to accompany the fleet to search for the new continent and provide the Empire with detailed information about Vilost. Roar! Blakesia swallowed the strange fish in one gulp. Her slender neck twitched, and she let out an excited roar. Her body, which had already grown to 16 meters, flipped in the air and rushed into the sea again. The enemy was right in front of the fleet. In the sea in front of the fleet, the dorsal fins of the strange fish had already surfaced. At the same time, thick tentacles covered with suckers extended out of the sea. After these tentacles pushed one of the scouting ships away, they waved wildly in an attempt to capture the roaring black dragon in the sky. Prodoc. Crendo's expression turned serious. He did not expect to encounter such an opponent on his first voyage leading the Northern Fleet. Prodoc was a term that originated from the ancient Orc language and was later inherited by the human language and common language. It meant a powerful octopus sea monster. This octopus was at most 100 meters long and had more than 24 tentacles. Its unique physiological system allowed it to float completely out of the sea when needed. Its terrifying regenerative ability and fatal entanglement attacks were its most obvious characteristics. At the same time, this sea monster could emit sound waves that land creatures could not hear, enslaving all fish it came into contact with. According to the records in the Monster Guide, the strongest octopus could even hunt adult sea dragons. It was one of the most terrifying monsters in the deep sea. Some fishermen and pirates who relied on the sea for a living would even worship Prodoc as a god and pray all night before going out to sea. Chapter 386. "It's coming for us," Kronder said. This went without saying. A sea monster like Prodoc would attack any creature it came into contact with, and it was even more violent towards non-marine creatures. The people on the deck had already started moving. Some set up whalers, while others loaded their muskets. All the cannons of the frigates were also turning around to clear the area of fish. The steam warships were at full power, and the deafening roars echoed throughout the sea, echoing with the thunder in the sky. The fleet began to accelerate, leaving long trails of white smoke behind them. They changed from their normal sailing formation to a defensive formation around the flagship, the Empire's Grasp, and used their firepower advantage to bombard it. Boom! The huge tremors and strong resistance made the king of the deep furious. It waved its huge and strong tentacles and slapped the nearest ironclad frigate, making a terrifying metallic sound. The side of the frigate that was hit by the impact was violently pressed into the water. At the same time, the bow of the frigate arched up high, almost capsizing. The turbulent waves rushed to the deck, and many materials that were prepared to be dried were swept into the sea. However, the scene of the frigate breaking into two did not happen. After a violent shake, the frigate miraculously stabilized itself. The 2 rows of launchers on the hull were still firing. Kronder heard a series of bubbles rising to the surface of the sea. The octopus monster's intelligence seemed to be unable to comprehend this fact. After all, it had never seen a ship like this. There was not a single sail or even a mast on it, only a chimney that was emitting white smoke. However, it was this strange ship that seemed to be able to tame the violent waves and storms. The disasters that humans worshipped like gods did not seem to affect it at all. Of course, a species like Prodoc would not delve into the reason behind this. The desire to destroy filled the monster's mind. After pausing for less than 2 seconds, the crazily waving tentacles launched another attack. Its target was still the frigate, and the powerful tentacles pressed directly against the ironclad frigate. This time, there were no accidents. The ironclad frigate was swept into the sea by the powerful pressure and then fell into the encirclement of the fish. No one could survive in such a situation. However, the next moment, the voyage fleet launched a storm-like counterattack. The loaded gunpowder and crossbows were instantly fired. The old era's heavy crossbows and the new empire's cannons appeared on the battlefield at the same time, intertwining with the beautiful colors of iron and fire. The colorful combo completely enveloped the school of fish, and beautiful flames burned on the surface of the sea hundreds of meters away. The enemy suffered heavy casualties. This area of the sea was filled with fresh blood and smelly fish corpses. Even a monster Prodoc lost 5 tentacles. Other than one being torn off by Black Dragon and Blakethea, the rest were destroyed by the fleet's firepower. Krendo did not care about the enemy's losses. Since he had already suppressed them, he would suppress them until the end. The order from a flagship was simple and direct. For the Empire, attack. Very quickly, Prodoc's powerful regenerative ability began to show. Its broken tentacles slowly regenerated in the battle. Blakethea could not do anything to this guy. The Black Dragon's acid was coincidentally countered by the regenerative ability. She did not have a complicated breathing system like Caesar. Although the Black Dragon could also display very strong combat power in the sea. In comparison, this was more like Prodoc's home ground. Sir, this can't go on. Please give the order to use the main cannon. The situation was not optimistic, and the tense atmosphere made it easier for people to get carried away. At this time, Krendo's deputy was already sweating profusely and could not help but beg. Don't be anxious. Krendo shook his head. He frowned and stared coldly ahead. In an instant, this old man seemed to have returned to the best time of his life. He was filled with an unquestionable aura, and the subordinates in the command room were speechless. Prodoc was not scared off by the firepower. Relying on its regenerative ability, it was unwilling to leave and continued to attack the fleet, summoning more deep-sea servants to consume the fleet's firepower. Sir, 2 shots, no, maybe 1, and we can heavily injure it, not now. Krendo interrupted his deputy. He stared ahead without looking back and shook his head firmly. Of course, he knew very well that with the power of the main cannon of the Empire's grasp, 2 shots would be enough to kill Prodoc. Even 1 shot would be enough to heavily injure this octopus monster. That kind of injury could not be healed in a short period of time just by relying on its regenerative ability. However, the prerequisite was that the target had to be a part of its body and not its tentacles. Before going out to sea, Krendo had already studied the relevant knowledge and had a good understanding of the monsters that could appear in the sea. Its tentacles were Prodoc's weapon of attack and its most regenerative ability, but they were not its core. Even if all of these tentacles were cut off, it would not be able to cause much actual damage. The terrible caliber and exaggerated barrel of the super heavy cannon was also a flaw in some ways. Due to the immature design and structure, it was difficult for it to accurately attack enemies below sea level. If Crendo did not want to give the sea monster a warning in advance, he had to wait for a better opportunity. Prodoc had the ability to surface to attack, and according to the human's understanding of the species, it would indeed surface to hunt when attacking air units. At this time, Blakesia's wings and hind legs were suddenly entangled by two underwater tentacles, and she was caught in a struggle of strength. Although the young female dragon managed to escape with her dragon language spell, the situation was already quite dangerous. "Sir, Her Highness Blakesia is in danger and needs our help. Wait a little longer." The black dragon continued to fight with the sea monster. Without the support of the main cannon, the weapons of the frigates and scout ships were not strong enough to cause major damage to the sea monster. They could only provide some assistance from the sides and continuously eliminate Prodoc servants. 5 minutes later, Captain, the staff in the command room were already drenched in cold sweat. Her Highness Blakesia was obviously at a disadvantage and was in danger. If anything happened to her, they could not imagine what would happen to them. Perhaps everyone present would have to die together with Emperor Black Dragon's sister. The staff in the command room looked at each other. If Captain Crendo did not give the order, they would have reason to suspect that Crendo had other intentions. They would have to take forceful measures and seize command. After all, no one wanted to face the wrath of the Emperor in the future. "Now, activate the aiming system in the control room and listen to my orders." Croendo's sudden roar shook the hearts of everyone present. They immediately reacted and moved quickly. At the same time, Prodoc took the opportunity. His body, which was almost 40 meters long, completely surfaced like an island in the sea. The dancing tentacles gathered at the same time, blocking all of Blakesia's escape routes and attacking her in an instant. "Damn it," Blakesia cursed. "Fire!" Crendo roared. Boom! An electric arc flashed, just as Prodoc was about to use all his strength to kill the black dragon. A ball of fire suddenly appeared at the front of the largest ship that was tightly protected at the back. Prodoc's monster instincts made his hair stand on end, as if he was facing a legendary wizard's fatal pyroblast. However, he did not have time to react. The moment the thunderous sound entered his hearing system, the 2,700 pounds of super-heavy, enchanted armor-piercing shells had already pierced through his body. Prodoc's back, which was full of sarcomas, suddenly arched like a small mountain and then exploded. Countless pieces of flesh and organs were thrown high into the air. Blood and body fluids spurted out of his body, even forming a cloud-like mass of air on the sea surface. The writhing tentacles stopped moving for the first time. Prodoc's body fell backward, creating a huge splash. Finally, he sank into the water. The servants of the deep sea that he had summoned had already begun to flee in all directions. Garen, the young female dragon, was dumbfounded. She even unconsciously called out the name of the other dragon. After she calmed down, her voice still sounded surprised and doubtful. "Caesar, this guy. What on earth did he do?" Blakesia was stunned for a while, but soon her expression became ferocious and twisted. "Those stupid bastards on the ship. How dare they use the great Blakesia as bait? Damn it, I want all of you to go to hell." Chapter 387. It's dead. We've won, my lord. Seeing Prodoc slowly sink into the water, blood flowing out of his wounds and covering the surface of the sea, the second-in-command put away the telescope and shouted excitedly. This was a meaningful scene. Although there were spellcasters in the fleet, there were no archmages who could fight against this monster. The Black Dragon Princess, Blakesia, also did not have the power to defeat Prodoc. Even so, the people who could only despair at the sight of this monster were killed in one blow by the powerful force of the Empire's grasp. The most important magic played a very small role in this battle. This battle was definitely worthy of being recorded in the history of the Empire. However, Kendra's expression did not relax because of this. Instead, it became even more serious. Beads of sweat covered his forehead. He knew that the fleet had indeed dealt with the threat of the sea monster, but he was afraid that he would have to face an even more difficult situation. "Contact the Imperial Court," Kinder said. "My lord, the court's order is that we can only build it after we reach Vilost," the second-in-command reminded him, not understanding the situation. "Listen to my orders." Captain Kinder's voice was slightly louder. "Record officer, stay here and report the situation to the court. The rest of you, leave the command room and follow me to the deck." Blakesia did not look at the fallen body anymore. She flapped her wings and returned. Although she had received Caesar's order to travel with the fleet, she did not stay with the humans along the way. She always hovered in the sky and occasionally went into the sea to hunt. However, this time, the Mother Dragon's target was the flagship, the Empire's Grasp. The Mother Dragon situation was obviously not right. After the battle, her body was still filled with a strong magic reaction. Her eyes were burning with anger. At the same time, on the Empire's Grasp, the command staff had already boarded the deck under Kinder's orders. Everyone knelt down in the wind and dragon's aura, respectfully welcoming her arrival. "Your Highness Blakesia, you cowardly, ignorant, lowly, and stupid scum." Blakesia let out a roar without holding back. Poisonous acid dripped from her ferocious teeth and sizzled on the steel deck. "All of you deserve to die." The dragon's roar made everyone tremble in fear and panic, but Kinder knew the reason for her anger. As the leader, he said in a low voice, "My apologies, Your Highness Blakesia." The situation was urgent and difficult to communicate. Only when Prodok floated to the surface could the weapons on the Empire's Grasp cause any real damage. Attacking its tentacles were meaningless. In that case, we could only wait for an opportunity. "You don't know." Kinder's assistant was also a smart person. He roughly understood what was going on and quickly explained, "Our real weapon is actually only the main cannon of the grip of the Empire. If we attack its tentacles recklessly and it's on guard, this monster might choose to destroy the grip of the Empire first. Once that happens, we'll lose our ability to resist and end up in their bellies, unable to complete the mission given to us by the court." "You're completely right," Blakesia sneered. The words of the humans made her even angrier. Since when did these weak humans dare to quibble in front of a great dragon? "No." Captain Kinder looked up at the black dragon. He felt that such an explanation would only have the opposite effect in front of Blakesia. So he said, "As the commander of the Empire's fleet, I cannot guarantee your safety. This is unforgivable. I am willing to accept the judgment of the tribunal." The tribunal was a department created by the Empire a few years ago. It was led by the Radiation Golden Dragon, Rand Crotowak Tangerine, who was most loyal to the Black Dragon. It was extremely tough and was in charge of dealing with the internal affairs of the Empire's clans and army. It was the place that the officials serving the Empire were most unwilling to talk about. "Now it is time for the judgment." Blakesia opened her mouth, ready to unleash her dragon's breath. "You idiots who bring shame to the Empire have no need to exist." "Wait." Kinder stood up, trembling. It was not because he was afraid, but because he could only do this under the dragon's aura. He looked up and said, "Your Highness Blakesia, the others in the command room have suggested to fire earlier to protect you. I was the one who ordered them not to move. This is all my fault. I am willing to accept the wrath of a dragon. As for the rest, I beg you to let them go and complete His Majesty's orders. Then you can go and die first." The Mother Dragon's patience had reached its limit. "Blakesia." Just as the Black Dragon was about to spit out the dragon's aura, a low voice suddenly sounded from inside the Empire's grasp and echoed on the deck. This voice caused Blakesia's body to tremble. The dragon's aura disappeared, and the aura stopped. She lowered her head slightly and looked around subconsciously. She said in a low voice, "Caesar, I am aware of what happened here. It will be handed over to the tribunal. If there are any problems, the tribunal will deal with them according to the Empire's laws," the Black Dragon said calmly. "You want to control me again?" Blakesia's voice became louder, and she screamed in agitation, I listened to everything you said and did everything according to your wishes. But now, you won't even allow me to kill a lowly human. You won't allow this. You won't allow that. You won't allow anything. You won't allow anything. The black dragon's huge projection appeared on the deck. Caesar lowered his head and stared into Blakeesia's eyes. His voice became serious as he said, "Listen carefully. I will only say this once. He is not a lowly human. He is a citizen of the Blackwing Empire. They are all citizens." Beside the Black Dragon stood a few other high-ranking officials of the Empire, including the Demolic Wren, the tribunal leader Crotawak, and his younger brother Garen. The furious Blakeesia and Caesar looked at each other for a moment. Then, she turned her head away and roared crazily. Her aura poured into the sea, and her sharp claws twisted and broke a few of the steel structures on the deck. After she vented for a while, Caesar walked forward. The shadow closed its claws and hugged Blakeesia. His voice became gentle as he said, "Okay, this matter will be dealt with like this. Galanaud needs to be expanded. Another city is being built in the west. If the voyage plan is successful, I will hand it over to you." Blakeeshia was stunned at first. Before her joy could be replaced by anger, for some reason, she smelled the scent of Caesar. It was a new and exciting scent that could make any female dragon intoxicated other than the usual scent of dried roses. She felt her body go numb and her throat dry. Garen, who saw this, also felt his body go numb and his throat dry. Chapter 388. The dim shadows continued in the night, outlining the outline of the courtyard. Under the illumination of the furnace, the walls showed subtle differences. After turning off the magical communication device, Caesar could not help but shake his head. The encounter of the long-distance fleet was a small matter to him, but some of the attitudes revealed by Blakeesia were not small problems. It had been a long time since the Blackwing Empire was founded. Just as Caesar had hoped, it had become a powerful country where many races lived together. However, being powerful did not mean being tolerant. Although the Blackwing clan could coexist with humans, they had never considered humans as part of the empire from the bottom of their hearts. This could be seen from Blakeesia's attitude when she called the human captain a bastard. This also represented the attitude of most of the core clans in the empire. The emergence of this situation was actually related to Emperor Black Dragon's decision. Back then, Caesar did not have any cases to refer to, so he could only feel the stones to cross the river. The special clan plan was thus born. Strict and high-pressure hierarchical control and class opposition created various levels of nobility and inferiority. This plan had achieved great results back then. In fact, until now, the special clan plan itself had not had any problems. However, as the empire ushered in a transformation, the functions of various industries became more and more detailed. The abilities of monsters could not meet the needs of the empire, so more and more capable humans were promoted. For example, the Minister of Shipbuilding, Krender, and the Minister of Propaganda, Barrett. Their hard work and loyalty had exchanged for a position in the empire, but they were not recognized by the higher-ups of the Blackwing clan, such as Hog and Nero. They also did not receive the respect that they deserved, so the hidden danger brought about by this could not be ignored. Due to the power of Emperor Black Dragon, it was unlikely that they would do anything disobedient or rebellious. However, slacking off was inevitable. Even if Caesar replaced all the departments with new people, if the root of the problem was not solved, similar problems would appear again after a period of time. In the current situation where the sun never sets, Caesar could not allow such a mistake to occur. He had to stabilize the hearts of the people, both internally and externally. The next day, under the orders of Emperor Black Dragon, the higher-ups of the empire held a plenary meeting in the palace. At the same time, in the eastern region, thousands of miles away from Iradia's northern territory, an unexpected war broke out in the swamps. The Kingdom of Swamp, as the people on the continent used to call the dwarves who ruled this place, but the Kingdom of Swamp was not a country. It had never been one. In fact, It was more like a military alliance composed of the Red Castle, the Kingdom of Grey Castle, and the Kingdom of Iron Castle. The history of these dwarven kingdoms was probably much older than people could imagine. As early as the Second Era of the Orcs, they had already stood on this land. However, compared to the Orcs, the dwarves were smarter and had better judgment. Therefore, in the era of the rise of the human race, the ancient dwarves did not have a large-scale conflict with the new race. Instead, after several contacts and comprehensive judgment, they chose to conform to the trend of the times. They gave up large pieces of their own territory and retreated to the swamp together with the other two dwarven kingdoms to form an alliance and continue to live. Therefore, these seemingly unified dwarves actually had different histories, different ancestors, and different customs. Their kingdoms were actually not called the Red Castle, the Kingdom of Grey Castle, or the Kingdom of Iron Castle, but they had their own names. However, the dwarven language was too long and complicated to translate into the common language, so they came up with these alternative names. After thousands of years of alliance, today, under the seemingly harmonious appearance of the Three Castles Kingdom, there was actually a state of mutual hostility. In the Alliance of Swamp, the high-level mages and rich merchants were basically members of the Kingdom of Red Castle. The people of Red Castle believed that they were the descendants of Moradin, the god of dwarves, and were the indisputable royal family. They firmly believed that Red Castle was the mainstay of the Alliance of Swamp and should occupy the leadership position. The predecessor of the Kingdom of Iron Castle was the famous Warhammer clan in the Second Era. Their ruler, Prince Macne, was the most powerful warrior in the swamp. The dwarves of Iron Castle, like their king, were born with extremely strong bodies and claimed that they were born to fight. This kingdom provided more than half of the army for the military alliance, but was regarded as rude and unreasonable by the Red Castle. In order to restore the glory of the past, the Iron King was still working hard for his ideals, striving to forge the Three Castles into a complete and unified empire. In addition, the dwarves of Grey Castle, who were ruled by Prince Athos, spent most of their time in the forging room and underground. They were famous for their amazing forging skills, and the halberd of Athos, which was named by the prince himself, was one of the most powerful legendary weapons in this era. Although the dwarves of Grey Castle focused on forging skills and rarely spoke in the alliance, they had the right to control the underground metal mines, which made the other two kingdoms very jealous. Now, the alien threat theory of Emperor Enrique was known to the world. When the order and request of the sun-never-setting empire arrived in the swamp, the Three Castles Kingdom had different political opinions. The Red Castle had close relations with the sun-never-setting empire, so Prince Marin thought that they should immediately respond to the proposal of the sun-never-setting empire and reach an alliance. On the other hand, the Iron King of the Warhammer clan showed his unyielding side. He thought that this was a disguised surrender. If the sun-never-setting empire wanted to form an alliance with the swamp, they should have invited the three kings to the capital of the sun-never-setting empire to meet and discuss. Instead, they sent an arrogant messenger. This was an insult, and he refused to accept such an order. The two kings argued endlessly, but Prince Athos remained silent. Although it was said that he wanted the Swamp Kingdom to cut off relations with the Blackwing Empire, in fact, he wanted Grey Castle to cut off relations with the Blackwing Empire. This was because whether it was the Red Castle or the Iron Castle, they had no relations with the North, but Grey Castle was different. After thousands of years of residence, the native mineral resources of the swamp had long been exhausted by the dwarves. In the past, Grey Castle's forging furnaces had to constantly import expensive raw materials from the trading city-states. However, after the new trade relationship was established, the Blackwing Empire regularly sold minerals and forging parts to Grey Castle at a relatively low price. In addition, they also sold food, herbal drinks, elegy cards, and other daily necessities that the people of Grey Castle needed. Their cooperation did not stop there. The Blackwing Empire requested Grey Castle to design standard equipment blueprints, and some of the new materials were also completed in Grey Castle. At the same time, the North continued to provide Grey Castle with high remuneration opportunities. They had also jointly developed new armor for the demon hounds and beastmen. In short, the two sides had built a deep friendship in a short period of time. No matter what, we can't cut off this trade relationship unless the sun-never-setting empire can give my people enough compensation, Prince Athos thought. No one had thought that just because of different opinions on this matter, it would lead to a war. However, when the flames of war spread throughout the swamp, everyone was stunned. Even the initiator of this matter, the sun-never-setting empire, did not expect things to develop in this direction. The diplomatic situation was only the fuse. The internal conflicts of the three castles had reached an irreconcilable point. The thousands of years of alliance, all the patience, grievances, and concessions all exploded at this moment. The alliance was torn apart, the flags were trampled, and the dwarves, who looked the same but wore different armors, began to kill each other. In the end, when Prince Marin's magic, the Iron King's warhammer, and a legendary halberd lit up the night sky, the collapsed furnaces turned into endless flames with the help of the elements. The swamp was completely destroyed and became a dangerous place where survival was difficult. There were no winners in the civil war of the three castles. After the destruction of the war, and the disheartened dwarves went their separate ways. They walked on different paths. The king of the Red Castle led his noble mages to the sun-never-setting empire, believing that they would be treated with respect in the Magic Empire. Macnay and his powerful Warhammer clan announced that they would leave the Swamp Alliance and migrate to the most open and tolerant central region to settle down. Athos and the dwarves of Grey Castle, who had suffered the most losses, set off on a long and distant journey. They had to cross half of Iradia and visit the Emperor of the North, whom they had yet to meet, the Black King. Chapter 389. Caesar shrunk his body and curled up on the steel throne. His sharp claws gently rubbed the smooth armrest. He was too big, and it was difficult to maintain his original form. Imagine what a moving 50-meter-tall mountain would look like. This guy's every move would bring great disaster to the surrounding creatures. So, without needing to fight, Caesar began to use his psionic ability to compress his body and maintain a suitable form of about 5 to 7 meters. The shrinking of the body also brought about a change in temperament. Caesar was no longer majestic in this case, but this was what Luna liked. To be honest, if the big stupid dragon was too big, it would be daunting. Even she was the same. This was more intimate. This proposal was originally proposed by Luna. Under the scorching afternoon sun, Caesar left the royal court. Last night, under Luna's incessant pleas, Caesar had no choice but to agree to take her out to play. She wanted to take a stroll around the commoner's district that he had created but rarely stepped foot in. Along the Yanan Street leading to the royal court, Caesar slowly walked out. The Blackwing Empire was not as deep, dark, and unbearable as described in the alien threat theory. Even close to the dragon's nest, the sun was still warm. Both sides of the road were full of swaying Yanan flowers, exuding a fragrance. Compared to humans, whether it was dragons or clan monsters, they were indeed dirtier and smellier. But whether it was the royal city or other areas of the empire officials would pay a sum of money to hire people to clean the city every day. These cleaners included humans and clans. Even with this system alone, the Blackwing Empire could not be compared to the highly developed The Rising Sun City, but it was definitely cleaner than the self-proclaimed civilized countries of Higiene County. The Iradia people did not have the concept of an epidemic and called it a curse instead. So, it was difficult for them to have a complete concept of hygiene. Whether it was the northern countries that had disappeared or the Higiene County that still stood strong, these small countries rarely had private rooms, toilets, in the palace of the rulers of these small countries. To them, it was normal to urinate and defecate everywhere. The corners of the city streets were filled with human and animal feces, household garbage, and countless sewage flowed freely. When the accumulation reached an unbearable level, the rulers would let the mages remove all these things, but the city would then fall into a new cycle. Only relatively developed countries like the trading city-states began to have public baths, sewers, garbage disposal, and other necessary systems for the city. But even so, it could not change the fact that the people did not care about hygiene and liked to defecate everywhere. The various processes made Caesar instantly think of a ridiculous and funny story, and he could not help but grin. In the trading city-state of Atlantic City, because the geographical location of the city hall was too close to the streets where the people lived, it led to the judges of the city hall being troubled by the stench of feces. In the Third Era, 1579, the local judges jointly proposed to the ruler of Atlantic City to try to prohibit the people from defecating in the streets around the city hall. As a result, it caused a large-scale riot. A delegation led by a local craftsman went to the Lord's mansion to protest the judge's violation of the sacred freedom law of the trading city-state. The people said, "Our fathers defecated here, now I'm defecating here, and my children will also defecate here in the future." Such words received widespread support at that time, and in the end, the battered city lord had to admit that the people of Atlantic City of the trading city-state were born with the right to defecate wherever they wanted. On the other side of the continent, when the Blackwing Empire was first established, it had spent countless manpower and resources to build perfect public facilities for the people to use. In the meantime, the Northern Royal Court had also taught the people a new word, fertilization. Using feces to periodically water the crops, even without the blessing of the earth god, they could still get a good harvest. After knowing how to fertilize, farmers who picked up feces started to appear in the towns and villages. They were all hired for free and could share the burden of cleaning the city. Other than that, the empire had also enacted several mandatory measures to reverse the bad habits of the clans and humans under its rule. Caesar. Luna poked her head out from the thorns on his back, just like when they were young. "You're giggling again. What are you thinking of?" "Something interesting." Caesar continued to walk forward. Tell me. The marble palace and fragrant garden were left behind, and Yanan Street had come to an end. Caesar talked to Luna as he turned towards the Cross Avenue. There is not only one Cross Avenue, but as its name suggested, it was formed by two intersecting main roads that ran through the entire imperial city. With the royal court standing in the middle as the core, it was divided into Upper Street, Lower Street, Left Street, and Right Street, dividing the imperial city into different areas for the people of different social classes and races to live in. Caesar and Luna walked aimlessly through the streets. Although they still attracted a lot of attention, it was not enough to cause a commotion. After telling the story of Alanti to the little one, Luna looked a little embarrassed. She did not get the Black Dragon's joke. If that's the case, why do humans release their own feces? Caesar was stunned for a moment, but then he remembered that human-like creatures were just a nickname given by humans to fairies and elves. Academically, such creatures were called goblins, and goblins did not excrete. Otherwise, Garcia would have been hung upside down for 7 days. Luna could not understand the meaning of the joke. Luna did not ask further. After the Cross Avenue, it was not as strict and cold as Yanan Street. Both sides were gradually bustling. The imperial city of the Black Wing was the largest city in the north. The streets were colorful and bustling. Taverns, warehouses, and casinos were next to each other along the streets. High-end and cheap brothels were closely connected. The streets of the entire city were connected into a continuous flow of people, trading day and night. Skinny shepherds bent over, selling goat's milk in pots tied to their shoulders. Wild boar people stared at the people on the streets with rigid eyes, fiddling with the farm tools that were sold at their feet. Some of the lizard and frog people from the West Coast also came here, selling live sea fish in the common language. The air was not only filled with the smell of barbecued meat and fried fish, but also the smell of hot asphalt and honey, more or less mixed with the smell of oil, spices, and salt. After turning a corner, the little one's attention was quickly attracted by other things. Since when are there such vendors here? Pork sausages, creamed vegetables. This barbecued meat with sauce smells good. Caesar, I want to eat. Since when did you like meat? Caesar turned his head to look at her, And there are so many cooks in the palace. You can ask them to cook whatever you want. You don't understand. How can the food at home be better than outside? Luna stared at the barbecued meat on the street and begged, Caesar, can you go and buy some? Now, as long as you are in the city, they will do business with the other races, even if it is a dragon. Chapter 390. Grilled Meat with Gravy. Caesar thought as he brought Luna to the vendor. Hello, dragon. Mister. Seeing Caesar walk over, the human peddler seemed a little nervous. Although the Black Dragon Emperor was only 7 meters tall and disguised as an ordinary wyvern, he could still bring a considerable degree of pressure to ordinary people. However, the peddler was not too nervous. After all, this was the Empire's capital. After tidying up his mood, he introduced in a warm voice, This is the secret barbecue of the DeLong family. Mister, do you want one? Come smell it. If you want, I don't even mind you taking a small bite first. How much? Caesar asked. The peddler glanced at Caesar without a trace. Observing was the most basic and most proficient skill of a merchant. It could be seen that this dragon descendant was somewhat different from the wyverns that usually patrolled the streets. It should be the kind of big wyvern that had a certain status in the clan and had been strengthened. You must be the most loyal relative of His Majesty the Emperor. The merchant said with a respectful look, As a tribute, I only charge you 20 copper coins. Are the guards all idiots? Caesar's voice was a little louder. This damn human wants to rob me. 20 copper coins? Did I just say 20 copper coins? No, no, no. The merchant hurriedly waved his hand and said, I must have lost my mind just now. My lord, the real price is 10 copper coins. 10 copper coins? Caesar smelled the fragrant sauce of the barbecue and found that he was actually a little hungry, but he still sneered and said, 10 copper coins. I want all the meat on your stall. 5 copper coins for one, my lord. If my wife knows about this, she will definitely beat me. The merchant begged. At this time, he suddenly saw the little guy lying on the back of the black dragon, staring at the barbecue without moving his eyes. He changed his tone and said, Look at your little pet. So cute. You only need 5 copper coins to fulfill her wish. This is not a pet. Caesar dug out 2 silver coins from the scales, 5 copper coins, as he said, These are all mine. Caesar, I knew it all along. You really are a goblin merchant. Luna grew slightly bigger and sat on his back, holding a skewer of fragrant meat in her hand. While eating, she murmured, You are the emperor of the empire, and you are willing to bargain with a merchant for a few copper coins. It's not about the copper coins. Caesar was also huffing and puffing as he ate the meat. His voice was muffled because he was chewing. 5 copper coins is enough for this guy to earn. He should sell at that price. And he thought that I was an ignorant wyvern descendant who didn't understand a market price, so he set a high price. This kind of selling method is wrong to begin with. The empire's rapidly expanding commerce had brought about enormous market vitality and profits, but it had also inevitably left behind many hidden dangers. The barbecue man's random asking price was only a microcosm of the chaos in the business world, and this situation was playing out every day within the Blackwing Empire. It was normal for the price of goods to fluctuate in a small range, but this kind of behavior was no different from cheating. Caesar, who had experienced this in his previous life, deeply hated it. He was considering whether to add a suitable law to control it. You are thinking about your country's affairs again. Seeing that he was silent, Luna did not need to guess to know what this guy was thinking. She said with a little grievance, You said you would bring me out to play today. Okay. I don't want to. Caesar finished the last bite of the barbecue and licked his lips. Were we just now? The streets were always crowded. They strolled through a gray stone warehouse. The orcs were storing carts after carts of food into the warehouse. And just next door, Caesar saw boxes of pepper, spices, and tea leaves being unloaded from carriages. On the other side, humans were throwing barrels of Northland beer, bundles of animal skins, and ready-made clothes onto handcarts, ready to be exported. Black Dragon took the little one for a stroll in the city, chatting here and there. They also stepped into the arena, the opera house, and the adventurers hall to play. Along the way, Little Luna would try any novel food she saw and would not stop until her little belly was round. It was getting late. Caesar was about to go back and end his day of relaxation. He turned around and turned at the entrance. Suddenly, his eyes swept across the sign of the oak house opposite. Elegy Tavern. Luna's eyes suddenly lit up. She excitedly hugged the thorn on Black Dragon's back. Caesar, you must be tired after walking for so long. Let's find a place to rest. I'm not tired, Caesar thought. But the elegy card game is quite interesting. He had not played for a long time, and his hands were indeed itching. Well, rest well today. While he was thinking, his body had involuntarily crossed the street, crossed the stairs in front of the tavern door, and entered the tavern through the door. The hall was not empty, but it was not crowded either. Most people were still working at this time of the day. Moreover, the imperial capital was the first place for the elegy card game. After a period of settling down, the people were familiar with the rules and could decide the outcome of the game on their own. There was no need to play in the tavern. As a result, the elegy tavern was less popular. That was to be expected. Caesar opened the door. Many people noticed the new dragonkin, while some buried their heads and continued to pay attention to their own game. Most of the people sitting around the table were humans, with a small number of orcs and flying apes. Caesar also saw the figure of a canine demon, which surprised him. People were whispering, and different lines were heard from the tables. Someone's hurt. Everyone, come over here. Asliers, give me strength. Caesar's ears twitched. It seemed that many people had bought the collector's edition of the elegy card. While thinking, he had already stood in front of the beautiful waitress in charge of the reception. The waitress had brownish-yellow hair. She looked at Caesar and did not show any surprise. She smiled and said, "Welcome to the Elegy Tavern, the strong one among the flying dragons. Do you want to have a drink? Or do you want to find an opponent to start your game?" "How do I start the game?" Caesar asked casually. The waitress with brownish-yellow hair said with familiarity, "First, you need to have your own set of elegy cards. If you don't, we also have a standard deck for you to use for free. During the beginner stage, our judges will be your opponent to help you familiarize yourself with the rules of the elegy. And all of this is free." It was a satisfactory answer. Caesar nodded and said, "I have my own deck of cards." She followed Caesar's gaze and saw that he was looking at the black pattern behind her. She smiled and said, "Mr. Dragon, this is the Black Rock Mountain expansion pack that we just released. There are a total of 31 cards, including the brand new demon cards and a small number of Blackwing cards. The collector's edition is priced at 3 gold coins, and the regular edition is priced at 10 copper coins. Do you need it? The price has increased?" Caesar murmured when he heard the price. He had handed over the elegy card to the operations department, so he rarely asked about it. Because of the cost, the collector's edition price has increased to a certain extent. The waitress smiled politely and explained, "But you can still buy the regular edition for 10 copper coins. You can also get most of the cards in the Black Rock Mountain expansion pack. Other than the experience, there is no difference between the collector's edition and the collector's edition." She sincerely recommended. "Yes, I have these too." Caesar nodded and took out his own deck of cards. "Can I just find someone to start the game with? If you don't have any familiar friends, we can introduce you to them." The waitress said as she found a large wine glass and poured Caesar free water. "Do you want to play with your Blackwing clan companions? Or do you prefer to challenge humans?" Chapter 391. Human. Caesar replied. The waitress was not asking for extra reasons. In the game of elegy, the humans' higher intelligence and faster thinking gave them a huge advantage. Although there were many masters of elegy among the clans, there was still a big gap between the clans and the humans in terms of the overall level of the game. "Okay, please wait a moment." As she spoke, she handed Caesar a glass of water and asked him to sit down. Then, she took out a picture book and prepared to record new information. "Do you have the level certification of the association? I can help you find an opponent of similar level." "Is this the ladder system?" "Last time, I just mentioned it to the person in charge. It seems that they have perfected the content and put it into operation. And there seems to be something called the association." Caesar thought to himself, but did not answer. The waitress saw this and nodded. The tavern will pick an opponent for you in the probationary stage. Please follow our referee. At this time, Caesar found that Luna was tapping on his spine. After a brief psionic communication, he used his tail to take out the item that the little guy gave him. He glanced at it and then handed it to the waitress. Is this it? I just forgot. Epic. The waitress raised her voice slightly. According to the association's assessment, the Epic players were basically semi-professional elegy players. Most of them were humans, and there were very few clans. She did not expect that the one in front of her was one. After carefully checking the authenticity of the badge and the dragon's claw and making a record, she gave Caesar an apologetic smile. I'm sorry, Mr. Dragon. There are no other Epic players in the tavern today. We have to match the opponent with the smallest gap between you and the opponent. It's okay. Caesar nodded. Then, please follow me. The beautiful waitress stood up and led Caesar to the sunny hall. The faint fragrance of wine floated in the air. She gestured for Caesar to sit down and wait at a long table prepared for the clan. She quickened her pace and walked to the edge of another table. She asked softly, "What are you doing?" "Mr. Galagas, would you like to play a new game? There is an Epic player from the clan looking for an opponent." "Clan's Epic?" A voice full of surprise and doubt immediately sounded. Accompanied by the movement of the chair, a bare-chested bald man with a brown beard on his cheeks stood up and looked curiously at Caesar, who was waiting not far away. Although he was strong, it was more appropriate to describe him as fat. The excessive fat allowed his waist to be comparable to the canine fiend. Caesar's psionic ability told him that the man was only 30 years old, but his vigorous beard and fat body made him look like an old man in his 50s. "Hello, friend." Galagas casually sat down opposite Caesar. "I never thought that someone from the Blackwing clan would be able to obtain an epic item. I thought that legendary and epic items were exclusive to humans." "Huh." Caesar handed the deck of cards to the referee for inspection before turning around. "Let's begin when you're ready." "Don't worry, friend." Galagas raised the wine glass in his hand. "A boring match is meaningless. Why don't we raise the stakes? Let's not play the game of picking cards. If I win, you'll have to buy me a drink. If not, I'll buy you a drink. Anyway, the cheapest wine is only 3 copper coins a glass. Is that okay?" "All right." Galagas was a warrior, while Caesar was a warlock, a new class that was released at the same time as the Blackrock Mountain expansion pack. "Wyvern, are you exploring a new class?" "I have to say, this new class is the downfall of the Elegy card deck. A powerful warlock that relies on the power of his bloodline actually drains his own life force. That's ridiculous. The creator of the Elegy card deck must have a grudge against warlocks." Galagas was a chatterbox. "But even if you're exploring a new class, I won't go easy on you for the sake of the wine." In the end, in less than an hour, he had already owed 5 glasses of beer. It was a crushing defeat. How is this possible? Galagas stared at his opponent's shining sorcerer badge. It was not a problem for him to lose 5 rounds in a row, but the problem was that he could not see any hope of winning in every round. His opponent seemed to be able to see through his hand, and every spell card was just right. From the beginning to the end, he did not have the slightest advantage. "Forget it, Galagas. Let's surrender. Don't continue." One of his companions tried to persuade him. They weren't locals. Galagas was reckless and always in a drunken stupor. He had instigated countless fights in the past, though they were all resolved smoothly. However, things were different now. This was the Northern Empire, and his opponent wasn't someone to be trifled with. Galagas ignored his companion and muttered to himself. "Previously, I heard the legendary card players say that the cards that the warlocks can use at this stage are too few, and the cards that they form are weak and unstable. This is not how a warlock should behave. Can I take a look at your deck?" Galagas raised his head abruptly and asked. "Up to you." Caesar pushed the neatly stacked deck of elegy cards to Galagas. His attention wasn't on the cards. When the last round ended, Luna cast a concealment spell and sneaked out of the tavern. Of course, this didn't escape Caesar's eyes. He was using his psionic powers to protect the little one. Blasphemy, Devil's plan, terrifying slave master. Galagas carefully flipped through the deck. Most players of the elegy would treat the deck as their own painstaking effort and wouldn't be willing to reveal it to the public. It wasn't easy for his opponent to let him see the deck, and Galagas's generous attitude left a good impression on him. A very basic combination, and none of the cards cost more than 8. Galagas sighed. While he could remember all the cards, he couldn't understand why the deck was so good in such a short time. After some consideration, he took out a bottle of wine from his pocket and handed it to his opponent. Wyvern, can you tell me how to use this deck? In exchange, I'm willing to give you a bottle of midsummer. The taste. I believe even your emperor will like it. I like it too. Caesar glanced at the fat man in front of him. When he said those words, the man's eyes shone with unparalleled confidence. A person like that was either a lunatic or a master. Caesar, who still maintained the appearance of a descendant of the flying dragon, took it and opened the lid. The dark brown wine inside immediately emitted a special fragrance. He took a sip, and the spiciness and dryness disappeared in a flash, followed by a mild and mellow taste. It was indeed a top-grade wine made by a master. Very good. Caesar was not stingy with his praise. There's no such wine in the north. Which country did you bring it from? No country can make midsummer. The fat man narrowed his eyes with a smile and said proudly, it was made by Galagas. He was a master brewer from the south. He had been searching for rare brewing ingredients all over Audiobook and experimenting with different brewing recipes. That was the reason he had come to the Northlands this time. However, for some reason, he had become obsessed with the elegy brand and had spent a lot of time and effort on it. Galagas scolded the wine in the north as boring and unpalatable, but because of the elegy card, he stayed in this place for a long time. Once, when he was drunk, he raised his glass and said, only wine and elegy will not disappoint. After chatting with Galagas for a while about winemaking and elegy, the door of the elegy tavern was pushed open again. Caesar turned around and saw a woman in a black robe and a black hood walk in. Chapter 392. Miss Tina. Quite a number of people greeted the newcomer. Apparently, Tina was the young lady of a certain Blackwing noble family. Although her appearance was not outstanding, she was very popular in the elegy tavern in King City due to her easygoing, generous spending, superb skills, and so on. Tina, Galagas, who was sitting opposite Caesar, greeted her. Rich, unimaginably rich. That was the only impression Galagas had of Tina. This lady's deck was made up entirely of collector's cards, and she even had all the cards from the 7 major classes. It was said that she even had all the cards from the Elegy Tavern. Come to think of it, there was a story behind it. When the Black Rock Mountain expansion pack was first released, Galagas spent the entire night tearing open the expansion packs in the Elegy Tavern in order to be the first to obtain a legendary card. Such extravagant spending was enough to make anyone look up to him. However, when Miss Tina came to the Elegy Tavern the next day, she found Galagas listless after spending the entire night tearing open the expansion packs. Her story was simply dizzying. She said, you actually opened your card bag for the whole night? I ordered the tavern to ship the expansion packs to my house and asked my squires to open them for me. I got my legendary cards in just 2 days. Oh, Emperor Black Dragon. No one knew what else to say. In the end, this saying became widespread, and many players of the Elegy Tavern believed it to be the best way to make money. Tina, who was wearing a black robe, went straight to the counter and said something. Soon, a beautiful waitress with blonde hair in an elegant bun came to Caesar's side. Mr. Dragon, would you like to continue the match? We found you an opponent on par with you. At the same time, Miss Tina, who was standing behind the waitress, winked at Caesar. Continue. Caesar nodded. He knew that Luna often went to the Elegy Tavern in disguise, but he didn't expect her to become a celebrity player here. Mr. Galagas, do you mind? The waitress looked at Caesar's original opponent apologetically. Of course not. Galagas smiled and quickly stood up. He couldn't wait to become a spectator and carefully study his opponent's techniques. At the same time, he could also sort out some of the ideas that Caesar had given him. Tina rolled up her black robe and sat down elegantly at the table. She remained expressionless as she handed the deck of cards to the referee for inspection. I can begin at any time. Meanwhile, the little fellow was squeaking through the psionic link given to her by the black dragon. Caesar, you big stupid dragon. You can't make up the rules in front of the referee today, can you? Get ready to accept your punishment. So confident, Caesar pushed the card to the referee. In a very short period of time, the tavern referee skillfully completed the inspection, shuffling, and cutting of the cards. After returning the cards to both parties, he tossed a coin to decide who would go first. Sorcerer Caesar against Druid Luna. Luna was the last to play. After looking at her hand, she smiled confidently and began to get into character. In order to defeat you, the great Demon King, my friends have helped me a lot. This time, I will definitely win. Friends? Caesar tilted his head. Elegy Card Operations Department. Forget it. Play your cards. I'll beat you first. Luna stared at the card table with great interest, concentrating. I passed. Caesar didn't get a single servant, so he skipped the first round. Luna did the same, but after Caesar exchanged cards with blood in the second round, I'm very sorry. Miss Tina raised her head and smiled at Fei Long, huh? Didn't she say that when she was about to kill him? The spectators were confused. Just as everyone was confused, the druid's attack began. Lucky coin. Activate. Astral link. At the same time, the judge determined that Miss Tina's mana crystal had reached the maximum value. Druid's innate ability. Transform, directly attacking the hero. End of turn. Caesar couldn't help but laugh. The little girl was obsessed with those powerful legendary cards, but it turned out that a reasonable combination of cards was more important than a legendary card. However, Luna didn't want to give up on these powerful big guys. In order to fulfill her wish, she asked the most professional player in the operation department for help and finally build a deck like this. Astral Link, good or bad, depended on one's luck. However, the little girl's luck seemed to be unexpectedly good this round. Caesar threw down a Rock Hill Defender with 3 costs, 1 attack, and 4 health with Taunt and Discover Effects. He chose another Rock Hill Defender from the judge's hand. End of turn. Luna, who was already empty, drew a card. The druid's exclusive card, Nourish. She drew 3 more cards from her hand. Caesar clicked his tongue. His luck was pretty good. If he wasn't careful, he might actually lose. However, at this stage, his warlock could only exchange cards with health to end the turn. In the next round, Luna's first follower appeared. It was a legendary card. The legendary card whispered directly into the Elegy Hall. When we awaken, the world will tremble. 9 costs for attack, 12 health. 4-winged dragon Tina Bolshk. When your turn ends, put a radiation card into your hand. When Miss Tina received the random radiation card from the judge, the spectators went into an uproar. Oh my God, how is she going to play? She only has 4 costs, and she's already facing such a legendary follower. She should just surrender. Her turn should start with 5 costs, but it seems like she still can't play. Miss Tina's next turn should be a legendary card. This isn't fair. This is a deck prepared for nobles. Us commoners can't get so many legendary followers. Someone complained in a low voice. Galaga's brows were also tightly furrowed upon seeing this. The situation that Fei Long was facing was even more devastating than any of the other matches he had faced. If he were Tina's opponent, then there was nothing he could do aside from surrender. Would the wyvern surrender? Surprisingly, the wyvern that was much larger than the average wyvern didn't surrender. It seemed to think that there was still a chance. It threw down another Stone Mound Defender card and used Doomsday Prophet to eliminate Tina at the beginning of its turn. In the following moments, the druid kept summoning legendary followers while the warlock tried his best to maintain the situation. The warlock was completely suppressed by his opponent and could only rely on spells and taunt cards to protect himself. Let the flames purify everything. Aslier's the Fire Demon King appeared from the flames. 8 costs, 8 attack, 8 health. Effect, unable to attack. At the end of your turn, deal 8 damage to a random enemy. I'll bring you great pain. Kato's the ancient red dragon roared. 9 costs, 8 attack, 8 health. Battle cry. Increases a hero's remaining health to 15. Balor the flame demon shouted. Asliers, grant me strength. Garen Nephadius shouted. Warlock, you're playing with magic that you don't understand. Everyone was dumbfounded. This was no longer a match of the elegy. It was more like a feast of classic cards. Legendary cards that were hard to come by in the past appeared one after another. The excellent sound effects dazzled the audience. But as time passed, some people gradually began to notice that even in the face of so many legendary cards, Miss Tina's opponent was still holding on. He was actually able to hold on. Chapter 393. Even though Wyvern had won 5 rounds in a row, Galagas was convinced that Wyvern had relied on his skills and calculations. However, Tina was different. She had relied on her legendary cards to suppress Wyvern's HP. From a psychological point of view, Galagas hoped that Wyvern could win, even if he was from another race. However, no matter how unwilling he was, Galagas could not help but sigh in his heart. I'm about to lose. At the critical moment, the warlock controlled by Flying Dragon was even faced with a desperate situation where he only had a drop of HP left. He could only rely on an old healing robot to recover his HP and barely survive this round. However, at this point, Wyvern's opponent had already stood his ground. 2 legendary cards, Tangerine, King of the Black Wings, and Garen Nephadius, as well as 2 other high-cost followers. It's about to end. Looking at the situation, Caesar paused for a moment before speaking in a voice that everyone could hear. Elegy has never been a game where one's legendary cards are stronger than the others. That was not the case when it was created, and it will not be the case in the future. As he spoke, he looked at his injured followers and tossed a gluttonous sludge monster and a horrifying slave master. Then, he cast a spell card, Blasphemy. He slowly leaned back and gestured to the judge. Please make your decision. Warlock spell, Blasphemy, deals 1 damage to all followers. If a follower dies, the spell will be cast again. Follower card, Horrifying Slave Master. 5 cost, 3 HP, 3 attack. Effect, summons another Horrifying Slave Master when the follower is injured but not dead. The referee maintained a proper expression and began to perform his duties. But soon his eyes widened and his lips opened. He found that the scene had fallen into a continuous cycle that was difficult to stop. The terrifying slave owners appeared again and again. Want to fight? Count me in. Everyone come here. Sweat dripped down his forehead. Under everyone's gaze, the judge fell into a stiff silence. He realized that he could not do it alone. Left with no choice, he had to ask for the help of 2 other judges. Even with the 3 of them working together, it still took them more than 10 minutes to confirm the results. The result caused a huge uproar in the tavern. Miss Tina's 2 legendary and 2 high-cost servants were all killed. Only 5 terrifying slave masters were left. Galaga's eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. How did you calculate this? Emperor Black Dragon. This kind of blasphemy isn't even written in the official elegy textbooks. This flying dragon is definitely not at the epic stage. I don't think even the legendary players in the latest tournament can do it. A spectator exclaimed from behind. What do you mean? Caesar asked through the psionic link. As a forerunner in a different world, he knew very well that Luna's deck could not possibly carry a spell to resolve the situation. Luna began to pull at her hair. If it weren't for her disguise, her little face would have been crumpled into a ball. In fact, it wasn't that Caesar didn't have similar high-end operations in private games, but Luna couldn't understand it, and Caesar always said strange things like details, algorithms, defense cards, and so on. It made her think that Caesar was just blindly making up the rules to cheat cards. But this time was different. The current situation was completely calculated by the judge. Her impression of the stupid dragon instantly grew. Could it be that it wasn't Caesar who was stupid, but herself? No. Luna shook her head and puffed up her cheeks. I haven't lost yet. Blessed by the elegy card god. My turn, draw a card. Spell, Spreading Plague. Druid's 6-cost spell, Spreading Plague. Summon a level 15 beetle with taunt. If your opponent has more minions, cast the spell again. From the perspective of the spectators, the situation was once again in a stalemate. The number of stone beetles on Miss Tina's table was equal to that of the slave master. Of course, this was just a last-ditch effort. It's useless. Caesar used a wounded slave master to launch a suicidal attack on the stone beetle. After it entered the graveyard, he tossed out another blaspheme and turned to the judge. Please make your decision. The judge's face darkened. There is no doubt that the wyvern was the final victor. Its exquisite technique and meticulous planning won the cheers of the spectators. The entire situation was perfectly preserved. After leaving the Elegy Tavern, Caesar felt a lot more relaxed. Rest and entertainment were indispensable to life, but after this, he still had to focus on the matters of the empire. It's definitely not an ordinary wyvern. Galagas looked at the empty table. It's the master of the elegy card god. I have to find it. The further away they are from Iradia, the more uneasy they feel, Crendo thought as he looked at the sailors whispering among themselves. The voyage fleet had been at sea for almost half a year. In the beginning, they still had to face the spying of pirates and the attacks of sea monsters. But as time passed, these things gradually disappeared. Even the birds that occasionally flew over their heads disappeared. It was as if all living things had left them. When they looked around, only the boundless sea and the boundless sky surrounded them. The sailors had half-jokingly said that they were sailing to the end of the world. Hearing this now, no one would be able to laugh. The unchanging scenery and the incalculable destination could drive anyone crazy. Even though the fleet was full of trained and selected crew members, mortals could not bear such torture. The crew members gradually became emotionally unstable. Some became timid and weak, and from time to time, they would whisper and pray for the blessings of the Black Dragon Emperor with tears streaming down their faces. Some became irritable and easily angered. They would always fight with their companions with anger on their faces, and they would only calm down after painstakingly comforting them. Seeing such a scene, Crendo did not interfere too much with the premise of stabilizing their emotions. On such a long voyage, pain was something every sailor had to go through. Back when he was on a merchant ship to Vilost, it was even worse than these people. Bad news came one after another. The consumption of food and water, as well as the occasional small problems with the ironclad, always tugged at the heartstrings of the sailors, causing them to become even more uneasy. Recently, they suddenly realized that even the Black Dragon Princess did not fly in the sky. She seemed to be very tired and had become sickly. She hid in the cold and dark bottom of the Empire's grasp and did not show herself. According to the news from the corvettes, most of the spellcasters on the voyage were also unwell. Their magic abilities dropped again and again, and in the end, they were not much different from ordinary people. This caused an even greater panic. People were afraid of being swallowed by the ocean, but Crendo knew very well that they were about to reach Vilost. 3 days later, a group of birds that had never been seen before suddenly flew over the voyage fleet. The signs of life made the sailors even more excited. Soon, they saw many green weeds floating over from the water in front of them. These weeds mostly grew in the cracks of the rocks. Everyone was spreading the news that they were about to reach land. Some of the lookouts mistook the clouds in the sky for land and cheered loudly. When they saw clearly that it was clouds, they were even more disappointed. Then they saw an island. According to Crendo's wrinkled nautical chart, they were close to the edge of Vilost. Some of the sailors suggested that they explore the surrounding islands first, but Crendo rejected it. Their first target was Vilost, and they did not have the time to stop at all the small islands that were as numerous as the stars in the sky. On the morning of the 275th day of the Iradia Third Era, 1661, the voyage fleet had their backs to the sun as they braved the wind and waves and sailed westward. The Empire's grasp let out a loud whine, and the black-winged flag at the top flapped in the wind. After breakfast, Croendo stayed in the captain's cabin. Just as he was about to write his diary, he suddenly felt a tremor outside. Soon his second-in-command rushed in and yelled, "Land, land!" "Captain, although the scouting ship's mana connection with us has been cut off, they fired a signal cannon. Did you hear it? They discovered Vilost." Chapter 394. Cheers to the Emperor of the North. Kindo put on his clothes and walked out of the captain's cabin. He ordered the sailors to take out the remaining wine in the warehouse and distribute it to the crew. Everyone's nerves had been stretched taut by the increasing pressure, and it was time to relax. As the captain, the pressure Kindo was under wasn't any less than the others. In fact, it was even greater. He was the one who handed the map to the Black Dragon and was the one in charge of the mission. If they returned to the Northlands empty-handed, he didn't dare imagine what would happen to him. That was why Kindo wasn't as calm as he appeared to be. The anxiety and torment in his heart were tormenting him. Fortunately, they managed to pull through. After half a year of drifting at sea, the voyage fleet had finally reached their final destination. Some of them even shed tears of joy. However, reaching their destination didn't mean the end of the mission. On the contrary, their mission had just begun. Kindo was an experienced captain. After taking a few sips of wine, he didn't lose his rationality amidst the cheers of his crew. He didn't give the order to disembark immediately and instead had the fleet patrol the coastal waters while using a telescope to observe the situation on the shore. Vilister was a hidden place for the Iradia. The light of civilization had yet to reach this corner of the world, so there wasn't a port on the continent that could allow large ships to dock there. The shallow waters near the shore were forbidden grounds for the voyage fleet. Given the displacement of the ironclad warships in the voyage fleet, even the smallest patrol and reconnaissance warships could not guarantee that they could safely and steadily reach the shore without running aground, not to mention the flagship, corvette, and supply ships. They could not enter the coastal waters at all and could only anchor in the sea far away from the shore. The Northlands landing ship project was still in the midst of a lengthy research and development process. Currently, the crew could only rely on the primitive wooden boats commonly used in Eladia to travel to land. This process was extremely dangerous. Due to the poor stability of the boats and their weak defense, once the soldiers were discovered and attacked, even if the enemy only used primitive bows and projectiles, the damage caused would be fatal. The suitable place Kindo mentioned was the coast that was away from dense trees and open terrain. That would allow them to observe the situation and provide support in case of an emergency to ensure the safety of the soldiers. Additionally, they could set up outposts the moment they got ashore to guard against attacks from the natives. After half an hour of observation and analysis, as well as a comprehensive discussion based on the information submitted by the scout fleet, Kindo chose the landing point for the soldiers. Solemnly, his finger moved horizontally on the simple, semi-finished map that relied on the integration of information, and finally stopped at a certain part. "We'll go ashore here." His words puzzled the others in the command room, because in the discussion and analysis just now, the commanders came up with a total of 2 landing plans: the open terrain of the entire south coast and part of the east coast. In comparison, the situation on the south coast was much better than on the east coast. Logically speaking, landing in a small area on the east coast should only be a backup plan, but Captain Kindo had chosen the more difficult path. "This is an order. Inform all landing personnel to get ready." Kindo did not explain his motives and immediately gave the order. The reason for this decision was that after a period of time, they would definitely have to leave this land. During this process, if they came into contact with the natives, as long as they were not stupid, they would definitely investigate their motives, the direction they came from, and the landing point. After they left, they would even build a tight defense line at the original landing point. This was not what Kindo wanted. He understood the predicament his country was facing. The Empire's blockade was strong and forceful, and trade had decreased sharply. There was a backlog of goods in the country, and the economy was in a slump. The unemployment rate and the various unstable factors brought great harm to the North. This suppressed country was constantly looking for a way out. If Villister was judged to be valuable, the Empire would definitely visit the continent again. Crindo wanted to hide the landing point on the south coast to create the best environment for the Empire's return. Landing training was one of the tests and training for the Northern Fleet. Soldiers who were unable to pass the test with flying colors would not be allowed to join the Northern Fleet. The court's orders were very strict in all aspects of military training. Even the spellcasters, who were a cut above the rest, had no special privileges and still had to undergo training and take part in the tests. So, from the time the order was given to the troops to the start of the operation, the whole process took less than 5 minutes. Soon, hundreds of landing vessels were dropped from the various warships of the voyage fleet. They were densely packed like dumplings in a pot as they moved quickly and orderly towards Villister. The plan to disembark was surprisingly successful. Perhaps it was because the natives didn't care about the security of the coast, or perhaps there weren't any native tribes around. Either way, the soldiers didn't face any resistance apart from the waves. At least for now, this is a rich land, Crindo thought as he landed on the shore. Crindo thought as he jumped onto the shore. When the voyage fleet approached, he had seen many beautiful islands surrounded by lush forests. Now that he was standing on the main continent, he realized that the climate here was mild and the land was fertile. It was much better than the barren land and harsh climate of Aladia. This kind of land should belong to the Blackwing Empire. Quickly take your things off the ships. Don't waste any time. Before they could even stand on the ground for 3 seconds, Kinder's orders came again. Head inside. We have to finish setting up the outpost before sunset. The Emperor's orders were to try their best not to offend the natives and to try to trade with them. They had to develop new trade products and establish a maritime trading system. But according to Crinder's own judgment, this was basically unrealistic. Otherwise, the trading city-states would have done their business there a long time ago. According to what he knew, the natives of Villister were a group of dark-skinned and muscular mutants. They had not developed into a highly organized society similar to a nation or city-state. In other words, the natives of Villister did not crave trade. On the contrary, they were extremely vigilant and hostile against outsiders. Coupled with the fact that they did not speak the language and had different customs, it was difficult for them to reach any kind of friendly agreement with the natives of Villister. The pioneers of the trading cities had already proven that such policies were ineffective. So, Crindo secretly disobeyed the Emperor's orders and acted on his own. He did not continue to waste his efforts in this area. Instead, he had his subordinates invest their limited time and energy into investigating Villister's climate, land, social structure, martial prowess, and so on. Chapter 395. Caesar was waiting at the Sighing Stronghold. The Sighing Stronghold had been built for less than 10 years, but it had become one of the most important strongholds at the border of the Blackwing Empire. It was also the Empire's largest war fortress. It was located at the peak of the Sighing Mountains and was connected to the Despair Stronghold, guarding the entire southern military route to the north. As the relationship with the south of Iradia became increasingly tense, the military forces in the stronghold were constantly being strengthened. Now, this unassuming and crude stronghold had gathered an army of 100,000, including 80,000 well-equipped regular human soldiers and over 20,000 clan monsters. At the same time, if a war really broke out, the 7 clan groups responsible for patrolling the southern border would be able to react quickly and enter the stronghold to provide support. At that time, more than half of the Blackwing Empire's military forces would be gathered here. It was not only a stronghold, but also a gate. When the gate was opened, the Blackwing Empire's army would be able to flow down the Sighing Mountains and penetrate any city in Iradia with their sharp blades and fangs. However, Caesar was not a madman who had lost his mind. Although he was unhappy with the empire on which the sun never sets, this little bit of anger was not enough to be a reason for him to risk his life with the other party. The war had not yet begun. This time, when he arrived at the Sighing Stronghold, other than patrolling the territory and checking the border defenses, the Black Dragon Emperor had another reason to wait for someone. He was waiting for the dwarf prince, artist Xiongxin, and the dwarves of Grey Castle that he led. Although most of the dwarves of Grey Castle did not care about worldly affairs and were obsessed with the development of new and advanced materials, their intelligence in other aspects was not much lower than that of humans. As their leader, Artis was even more unlikely to be an idiot who did not know anything. A dwarf clan that had suffered heavy losses and was proficient in forging, how many covetous eyes would they attract on the long journey? Adas knew very well that he still had the halberd heirloom in his hands, as well as the various fine armors and weapons in the hands of the other members of the clan. No matter how careful they were and how they camouflaged themselves, it was almost impossible for them to reach the north without encountering any dangers along the way. Thus, when he had decided to set off for the northern lands, Adas had written a letter to the Black Dragon in the name of the clan leader of the ambitious clan. In the letter, he recalled the friendly relations between the Northern Empire and the Stuart Kingdom, as the dwarves called themselves, to the Kingdom of Grey Castle, and affirmed the inseparable trade and solid alliance between the two sides. After that, he described in detail the course of the Battle of the Three Castles, as well as the crisis and predicament that the ambitious clan was currently facing. In the end, Adas sincerely asked the Black Dragon for help. The Northern Emperor quickly replied. In a letter, he called Adas a friend and stated that the Empire would immediately begin a protection plan for the Grey Castle dwarves to ensure their safe arrival in the northern region. However, in the south, it was difficult for the Blackwing Empire to directly dispatch troops to protect the Grey Castle dwarves. They could only provide the Grey Castle dwarves with economic, intelligence, and various other support through other means. For this, Caesar had even paid a price, exposing many of the black-robed and shape-shifting monsters that had completed their infiltration and disguise. This situation quickly improved after Adas and his clan reached the northern region of the Central Region. Within the sphere of influence of the Blackwing Empire, the kingdoms and clans that the Grey Castle dwarves encountered had a 180-degree change in attitude. Thus, the time they spent on the entire second half of the journey was not even a third of the time they spent on the first half of the journey. Finally, after a 4-month-long journey, the Grey Castle dwarves finally arrived at the Sighing Stronghold at the border of the Blackwing Empire. They stood before the Black Dragon Emperor, Caesar Tangerine. Just the fact that the Grey Castle dwarves had outstanding forging skills was enough to make Caesar value the Grey Castle dwarves. However, there was another reason why Caesar had spent so much effort to help them. In a sense, this was also a political performance. He was expressing to the countries in the south that the Blackwing Empire valued its trading partners and allies and was willing to be their backing and retreat. As for whether the Blackwing Empire and the Kingdom of Grey Castle had formed an alliance in the past, as long as both sides acknowledged it, then it was an alliance. Ada's Lofty Heart, representing the Stuart Kingdom and the Lofty Heart clan, has taken the liberty to pay you a visit. Your Majesty, Dragon King, Northern Emperor Tangerine, your friendship is unforgettable. Adas, the legendary master blacksmith, was currently standing before Caesar and bowing. Just like how the orcs clenched their fists, the dwarves did not kneel. They bowed to show their respect. Welcome, loyal dwarf. Caesar, who was in his original form, found it difficult to make a friendly expression, but his voice sounded quite gentle. The Black Dragon sized up the dwarf king that he had never met before. Although the ruler of the Stuart Kingdom was only half the height of a human, he did not give off a feeling of insignificance. He had a strong and robust body like a warrior, with his muscles wrapped within an armor that was engraved with mysterious patterns. He did not wear a helmet, and held a dark golden trident that was 2 meters long in one hand, while his wavy black hair was draped over his shoulders. Both sides were silent for a while, and Adas decided to take the initiative to speak. Although language was not the dwarf's strong suit, and he had spent a lot of time thinking of the opening speech, this involved the continuation of the clan, so he had to speak. Emperor Black Dragon, the fragile dwarven alliance has been destroyed in the flames of war, and the Lofty Heart clan has been displaced due to the destruction of their homes. Here, on behalf of my remaining clansmen, I sincerely ask for your protection. The North is not a paradise. Our enemies are also eyeing us covetously. Caesar lowered his head and asked, "What do you want to do, and what do you want? We hope that you can treat us like the elves, and give us a piece of land that you do not need, and give the dwarves an equal right to live in dignity," Addis said, lowering his head. "You will win honor and the respect of all the dwarves for this, and the Lofty Heart clan will always remember your name and surname." Caesar was very dissatisfied with Prince Atta's words. This was not the result he wanted to hear. When he received the news from the Grey Castle dwarves, Caesar subconsciously thought that they wanted to migrate to the north and join the Blackwing Empire, so they spared no effort to help. But in reality, this was not the case at all. The dwarves only wanted to obtain a piece of land in the north, and then rebuild their home under the protection of the Blackwing Empire. They did not even think of paying for this. All they gave was a promise, a mere verbal promise of honor and respect. Very good. This was very medieval. Honor. Emperor Black Dragon cracked a smile, his exposed huge fangs changing the atmosphere. What is honor? What is respect? Since when did the tricks of the humans start to work on the dragons? He said cruelly, then suddenly changed the topic, and his thoughts jumped. Dwarf, I think your halberd is quite interesting. When these words came out, the faces of all the dwarves, including Atta's, changed. The greed of the dragons was well known, and they knew very well what the Black Dragon was thinking. But Atta's halberd was not just a legendary weapon. It was the symbol of the Stuart Kingdom's current flag, the symbol of the Stuart Kingdom's existence for the past 200 years, and also the spiritual pillar of the Lofty Heart clan. Back then, the flag of the Three Castles military alliance was formed by the halberd of the Lofty Heart clan, the hammer of the Warhammer clan, and the staff of the Thunderer clan. The Black Dragon looked down in amusement, and the dwarves were all silent. After a while, Prince Asta's uncertain face finally calmed down. He paused and said in a low voice, "For the continuation of the Stuart Kingdom." This sentence seemed to be used to convince himself. As soon as he finished speaking, Atta held the dark gold trident horizontally and raised it with both hands. "Mighty Black Dragon Emperor, this is a gift from the Lofty Heart clan." "Very good." Caesar nodded, his big claws reaching down and picking it up without hesitation. Atta's halberd had 5 weapon characteristics, 5 ability blessings, and 2 different types of spell-like abilities. It was much more powerful than Alex's thirsty blood that Caesar had given a hog. The dwarves watched the Black Dragon Emperor's movements. They saw him put the halberd in front of his eyes, look at it, and then put it into his mouth and bit it. To the dwarves' surprise, the collision between Ada's halberd and the dragon's teeth did not produce any sparks, nor did it produce any ear-piercing sound. The only thing the dwarves heard was a continuous buzzing sound, like the whimper of metal. Clang! The halberd was thrown back. The Empire gives protection and support, and the elves give loyalty and friendship. Do you want to have the same dignity as the elves? But do you know that they have fought for the Empire and shed their blood for the Empire? The Black Dragon Emperor turned and left. Outside the fortress is all land. Come back after you've thought it through. Chapter 396. Not long after Black Dragon returned to the Sighing Stronghold, Hogg followed him in. "Your Majesty, are you really going to give up on these dwarves?" "Why?" Black Dragon, who had his neck flat on the ground, raised his eyes and said in a teasing tone, "Are you interested in them? They've traveled a long way from the distant swamp. Even if we cover them up, their whereabouts should be known by most countries. I'm guessing that before long, Iradio will know that the Grey Castle dwarves have come to seek refuge with the Blackwing Empire." Hogg explained. After pondering for a moment, he said, "If we let them go back like this, I'm worried that this result will become a sharp blade in the hands of people with ulterior motives. Those Southerners will wantonly promote the theory of the alien threat and discredit and distort the Blackwing Empire. This will have an adverse effect on our ice-breaking plan." "Ice-breaking plan?" Caesar repeated. Soon, he understood the meaning behind the name of the plan. He then shook his head and said, "You are anxious to open a trade gap with the South. This is not a problem, but this is not the most important thing right now. Currently, the focus of the Empire's work is mainly on the support plan and the New World plan. The voyage fleet has already arrived in Villister. As for the South, the iron curtain of the Empire on which the sun never sets has fallen. The situation is already set. It is not something that you can solve with your efforts alone. The Imperial Court can put it aside first, keep paying attention, and treat it normally. Those clowns who can't wait to hug the thighs of the rising sun city, let them talk, sing, and dance. The more energetic they are, the more afraid they are. One day, they will all kneel and tremble before the Empire." "I understand." Hogg nodded and remembered the words of the Black Dragon Emperor in his mind. However, his doubts were not resolved. He asked again, "In any case, these Grey Castle dwarves are a problem. No matter where they go or which country they join, they can make the country's forging level soar by more than a level. To us, this is intolerable. Your Majesty, should we?" Hogg's face revealed a fierce expression, his protruding tusks shining brightly. "It's not to that extent yet." Caesar smiled and then shook his head. "They have traveled a long way to reach the northern lands. It is impossible for them to move again and head to other places in a short period of time. Dwarves are stubborn creatures. If they really choose to set up camp outside the Great Wall and rebuild their homes in the wilderness, the longer it takes for them to settle down, the less likely they will be willing to join us." Hogg's face was still a little gloomy. "That's right. Dwarves are stubborn creatures, just like our orcs." Caesar nodded in affirmation, then exhaled and said, "But who said that the outside of the fortress is a safe place to live a stable life?" The beasts everywhere were eager to share every drop of blood. But I think that with the power of all kinds of elite equipment, the dwarves will not be defeated by the wild beasts. Go and contact the Wolfheart clan and tell the dwarves to face reality. The Black Dragon had never been a philanthropist. After paying a lot of price for the dwarves to successfully reach the northern lands, he would not give up unless he collected enough interest. The Wolfheart clan was a group of tribes made up of a group of species called foxes and wolves. The name of the species came from their physical characteristics when they were named. At first, foxes and wolves were a group of pure beasts like foxes and wolves, primitive and barbaric. They lived in groups and hunted in every corner of Iradia. But after a long process of evolution, foxes and wolves in the northern lands developed their own rich language at the end of the Second Age and began to have the ability to walk upright. They could also use weapons and tools like humans. Now, perhaps it was more appropriate to call them foxes and wolves. They had the limbs of wolves and the head of foxes. Their intelligence was not inferior to that of other humanoid races, and they had extraordinary agility and perception. They were a force to be reckoned with. From the period of the Northern Lands, to the period of the Green Dragon Sylvia, and then to the period of the Blackwing Empire, foxes and wolves had always been silently watching the changes in the Northern Lands. However, they had always been active near the eastern and southern regions, and had never interacted with Caesar, so they did not have much of a sense of existence before. However, they were one of the few tribes in the northern lands with a population of more than 100,000. In fact, the Wolfheart clan that Caesar had mentioned was not accurate. This was a large and highly organized group that had more than a dozen different clans, including Burning Mane, Bloodtooth, Wrath, and Madness. They were jointly ruled by the Council of Wolfheart, which was formed by the leaders of the clans. The greatest dream and demand of the Council of Wolfheart was to build a great, unified kingdom of foxes and wolves in Iradia. When such emotions spread from top to bottom, building a kingdom gradually became the lifelong belief and goal of every foxes and wolves, and even became the obsession of the entire northern foxes and wolves. This dream was unrealistic 30 years ago. The humans who had the right to speak would never allow a new foreign kingdom to appear in Iradia, let alone a kingdom built by extremely bloody and cruel species like foxes and wolves. During those years, the Wolfheart clan would face the joint encirclement and suppression from the entire northern lands every once in a while, so their numbers and strength were always within a controllable range. Later, Caesar appeared. What happened next was naturally needless to say. On a night without stars and moon, the black dragon landed on the earth with flames and swept across the northern lands to replace him. The foxes and wolves realized that chaos had arrived and were ready to take the opportunity to build their own kingdom. However, the Battle of Tahala and the Battle of the Dragon suppressed them in their caves, and they did not dare to show their faces at all. Before the outbreak of the Battle of the Three Gods, the tentacles of the Blackwing Empire had already spread to the foxes and wolves areas of activity. They had no choice but to offer their loyalty to the powerful empire. Due to the limited production level in the country at that time, and the Blackwing clan was close to saturation, Caesar did not absorb this large population of foxes and wolves, but allowed them to continue their activities in remote areas. Unexpectedly, they became a good hidden card in the end. Footsteps pressed on the barren sand of the northern lands, making a slight, rustling sound. The dwarves of the ambitious clan left the sighing stronghold. They did not know the Black Dragon and Tangerine, so they did not realize that they had fallen into a terrible choice of submission or death. And because of the act of returning the halberd heirloom, they even had a good impression of the Northern Emperor. Clan King, what should we do now? After walking for a distance, they found a water source, so the dwarves decided to set up camp and rest by a small lake that was not clear. The domesticated ponies were unpacked and sipped from the lake water. Some of the dwarves went to cut down trees and prepare to build tents. Emperor Black Dragon is right, Athos said. The elves' rights were bought with their blood and loyalty. The king of the north would not give us a piece of land for free, but the dwarves are born unwilling to become the slaves of others, and the Stuart kingdom does not have such a tradition to this day. Emperor Black Dragon has given us enough help to safely reach the north, but if we are not willing to become a vassal of the Northern Empire, we will have to rely on our own strength to stand firm. He raised his halberd and announced loudly, "The Stuart kingdom will be rebuilt in the north, and the glory of the ambitious clan will be with us." Chapter 397. The engagement ceremony had ended long ago, and the wedding would be held in the royal garden of Galanaud. Little Luna did not like the solemn imperial capital, the noisy west coast, or the hot and disturbing Blackrock Mountain. As for the strategic military towns of the Underdark, the border fortresses and the wilderness and Therengobi as logistics bases, those were even less of a choice. The only two choices were the Dragon's Lair in the green fields and the new city of Galanaud. She and Caesar discussed for a while and finally chose the relatively open new city. Galanaud was located in the Lackland district in the western part of the empire. It was currently the largest city in the Northern Empire and the bridge that connected the west coast to the imperial capital. Due to its location in the Lackland Inland Sea, Galanaud had the second largest estuary in the north when it was first built. The convenient sea and land transportation system allowed this new city, which had been built for less than 10 years, to develop rapidly. Prosperous businesses and handicrafts rose from the ground, and countless people flocked there. To the empire's citizens, this tolerant city was a brand new world with opportunities everywhere. Compared to the official title of Star of the North, given to Galanaud, the people preferred to call it the capital of freedom. The inclusiveness brought about by the diverse structure and the relatively relaxed policies of the officials made this place a place of dreams for many people. The unparalleled royal garden, the romantic Midland Sea, the massive classical sculptures. The unique environment enchanted countless bards, singers, and painters. Sculptors and spellcasters were also constantly rushing over, bringing colorful vitality to the city. Early on, after the successful engagement, a celebratory atmosphere had already enveloped the empire. The imperial court had issued a new announcement. In order to celebrate the upcoming wedding, all the major cities in the empire would hold a week-long celebration. All theaters, taverns, baths, and arenas would be open for free. At the same time, Galanaud, which had been selected as the venue for the wedding, issued an even more exciting announcement. In order to share this glorious moment with the people, Galanaud would provide free bread, bacon, and wine for the people of this city during the 7-day celebration. The Blackwing Empire's wedding of the century received a lot of publicity. This was also the result of the support of the Blackwing Empire's officials. From a certain point of view, this was a different kind of investment. The grand celebration would spread the news of it all the way to the various countries in Aladia. Be it adventurers, merchants, bards, spies, or intelligence organizations of hostile forces, there would be no lack of outsiders who wanted to witness this wedding. And after these people came to the north, their basic necessities would contribute a huge amount of consumption income to the empire. Caesar did not have many friends, and there were very few guests that he could invite. Therefore, apart from the Blackwing Empire itself, only the rulers of some small neighboring countries received invitations from the imperial court. However, Asliers of Blackrock Mountain received one. After all, this guy's Blackrock Mountain Elegy card pack, especially the King of Balrog's card pack, had sold especially well, and he had earned a lot of money for the empire through Blackrock Town. Therefore, Caesar kindly sent this guy an invitation. After all, Asliers was one of the few people who had the same status as the Black Dragon. However, with the mind of a demon lord, the Infernal Lord would most likely not leave his Blackrock Mountain. After all, this was not a fairy tale. He and Caesar were not friends at all. They were just two evil creatures that coexisted in the same area in some way. If possible, neither of them would give up the chance to bite the other. Asliers had to consider the possibility of being ambushed and surrounded. A week before the wedding ceremony, the ruler of the Elven Forest, Queen Garcia, signed the agreement, agreeing that the citizen of the Elven Forest, Luna Prin Tirope Offenstan Levin, would marry the emperor of the Blackwing Empire, Caesar Ortolunso Tangerine. On the morning of the 291st of the Third Era, 1661, the wedding ceremony was held as scheduled. There were about 500 wedding venues in Galanaud, and people could watch the ceremony from different venues. However, all the streets were not allowed to be obstructed. Be it vendors, shacks, or carriages, they were all cleared away, and the black-shirt men laid fences on both sides of the road. There was still a hubbub of voices. On the night before the wedding, many people poured into all parts of Galanaud, choosing to occupy advantageous positions. Even more people chose to stand behind the fences on both sides of the street, forming a long line, hoping to catch a glimpse of their queen. A huge shadow was cast on the ground. The Empire's radiation dragons were the first to appear. Today, they were not weapons that spread slaughter and fear, but flower children that laid out flowers and gifts. Amidst the clear cries of the radiation dragons, a rain of Yanan flowers from the royal garden fell from the sky, enveloping this city of freedom. Luna, wearing a wedding dress, came leisurely in a classical carriage accompanied by elves. The elven Queen Garcia handed her honor guard to Luna. The elven guards wore bright capes and walked at the front, their golden armor shining. They entered Galanaud from the east gate amidst the ceremonial music. That was the direction of the Elven Forest. The sacred unicorns of the Elven Forest pulled the carriage, starlight blooming wherever their white hooves passed. The carriage had been redesigned by craftsmen, woven from flowers and vines, embellished with Yanan flowers that had just bloomed. It was full of the freshness and elegance of spring. As the wedding was open to the public and had a certain performance nature, Luna could not appear in her overly small form. She changed her form and maintained the form of a normal human, wearing a floral crown from the Elven Forest. The four transparent wings behind her trembled gently with the jolts, indicating her identity and race. The hem of her elegant dress dragged to the edge of the open-air carriage. At the same time, on the other side of Galanaud, the clear sky suddenly darkened. The people's eardrums swelled as a colossal dragon streaked across the sky, bringing with it a howling storm and vibrating air. Caesar did not hide his might at all, almost maintaining the same height as the tallest building in Galanaud. Looking up from below, every scale of the Black Dragon Emperor was clearly visible emitting waves of power and vortices of psionic energy. Emperor Caesar. It was unknown where childish cheer came from. After a moment of panic and fear, the cheers quickly became continuous. The King of the North. Emperor Caesar. Emperor Tangerine. No matter how cold-blooded and harsh the Black Dragon Emperor treated his subordinates, or how vicious he treated his enemies, to the ordinary citizens of the Blackwing Empire, this emperor had indeed changed the North and changed humanity. The living conditions of the people under the Black Dragon Emperor's rule were completely different from those under the rule of the Northern Kingdoms. Life, dignity, knowledge, law, and fairness, these seemingly unattainable words had now become closely related to them. As the Black Dragon Emperor continued to strengthen the power of the empire, he was also constantly improving the living conditions of the people under his rule. When the people suddenly realized that the dragon rulers were more worthy of respect and love than the human rulers, the differences between the races would become less important. As he gradually approached the royal garden, Caesar's body also became smaller, from the initial 50 meters to 40 meters, 30 meters, and finally 10 meters, 5 meters. When Caesar landed in the royal garden of Galinaud, his form had already changed. He had turned into a rare, humanoid form, a draconid wrapped in black armor. It could not be helped. Dragons did not have a wedding ceremony, and considering the feelings of Luna and Luna's parents, Caesar could only use the wedding ceremony of other species as a substitute, carrying out the wedding ceremony according to the customs of the elven forest. Moreover, if he maintained his gigantic form, descending with a howl and taking Luna away with his mouth, such a strange operation did not look like a wedding ceremony at all, did it? When the Black Dragon Emperor landed in his human form and stood side by side with the forest fairy who was about to become queen, a strange question suddenly drilled into the minds of the people. Caesar Tangerine, the Dragon King, the Black Emperor, the King of the North, the most powerful true dragon in Iradia, who had the right to be the host and witness of his wedding. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.